Joe Rogan Podcast, check it out.
The Joe Rogan Experience.
Train by day, Joe Rogan Podcast by night, all day.
What's up? How are you? Good to see you.
It's good to see you again.
Good to see you again. Under less hostile circumstances. I don't think the last one was hostile. I think maybe more people expected it to be hostile because you were not. I want to say you're anti-cannabis. But I do think that you had a realistic perspective on cannabis, and we've talked about this before outside. That I think a lot of people that are pro-cannabis, like myself, they don't want to look at the negative aspects of it because they think that it'll harm the chances of it being legalized. Yep. And I think that's irresponsible, and I think it's not honest.
I mean, I think that's true. And now that it does look, let's be honest, like it's going to be legal. Certainly, every state or, there are major states that voted to legalize, like New Jersey and Arizona in the last election. And nationally, it looks like it's going to be legal. It's time for people in the industry, I think, to start being more honest about who this product is for and some of the downsides. I hope they do that.
They have to be. I think they have to be.
I brought you the paperback of Tell Your Children.
Yes, excellent. Well, you really should tell your children. Look, and again, this is coming from someone who enjoys pot. I like it. I'm a fan. But I do know it's not for everybody, and I do know people that have gone crazy.
Yes.
Like legitimately gone schizophrenic from marijuana, or maybe had a tendency towards schizophrenia and then smoked a lot of pot or ate a lot of pot and then the switch went off and they were gone. And I think there's a direct correlation.
Yes.
So I was glad to have that conversation with you, even though a lot of people are like, what, you're supporting him? How are you on his side? I'm like, because it's true.
Just wait till you get the blowback you get for today, man.
Well, let's establish your position, Alex, on COVID. What is your position on this?
Sure. So people accuse me of being a COVID denialist, or I don't think it's real. I don't think anyone dies from it. That's all nonsense, Joe.
Yeah.
COVID is real. It emerged from, we can talk about where it might have emerged from earlier this year, maybe in late 2019. It's killed a lot of people. It's contagious, and it's been a problem this year. It's been a significant problem.
Yeah.
It is not worthy of the response that we have had to it. I believe lockdowns have been a mistake, and we can go into all of it, but we have overreacted in an extremely dangerous way this year.
I believe we've overreacted as well. And I think that in particular, one of the things that disturbs me the most is that there's been no accounting for the damage that has been done by forcing people to shut down their businesses. And the only thought has been making sure that the ICU beds are open and that, somehow or another people are able to get treatment for this. I've openly criticized the fact there's been no discussion whatsoever about getting healthy. Like this, no one's encouraging you because they're worried about being called a fat shamer or some other nonsensical term.
Well, I mean, I think it's much worse than that because if you remember back in March, we were told 15 days to slow the spread. Let's not have the hospitals be overrun. And at some point, maybe it was in April, maybe it was in May, somehow this became no one can ever get sick and die from COVID. It is wrong that this disease exists, and we have to do everything to stop it, no matter what the consequences. And you mentioned businesses. Businesses are important, but to me, what's even more important is what we're doing to our kids.
Yeah.
What we've done with school closures, what we've done with normalizing the idea that being outside with your friends is dangerous. We are screwing over our kids in the worst possible way.
I think we had an idea of what COVID was going to be. I don't know. I certainly did for the first few weeks. I was like, this is going to kill everybody. I thought it was going to kill like 10% of the population. I was really worried about it.
Yeah.
I remember being in the supermarket stocking up and thinking, Jesus Christ, like this feels so crazy. But I also remember thinking it was going to last 2 weeks.
Yep.
And now here we are, still reacting this way. We're now deep into January, or deep into December, almost into January.
Yep.
A lot of my friends were caught it, including young Jamie over here. Jamie beat it in a day. Tony Hinchcliffe has it now. He was sick yesterday, and today feels good. I mean, this is the case with so many people. Yes. Whereas if they got the flu, I know a lot of the same people that have got the flu, they were knocked down into the dirt for 3 or 4 days, maybe a week, maybe 2 weeks. It's different than we thought it was going to be, but we're still reacting like it was the same thing. And then there's this fear porn that everybody likes to peddle. It's this weird thing where everybody wants to think that, if you catch it, you have a 10% chance of dying or the sky is falling. And it's weird how people want to pretend that it's still what it used to be. And they want to say, you should think about this because 300,000 Americans have died. And you want to go, stop. No. 300,000 Americans have died from COVID that also had a lot of other stuff. How many people have died just from COVID? And it's a relatively small number in comparison. It's like a bad flu year, right?
So it's complicated. Here's the thing, and I don't know if you this is, as I said, I got all this stuff for you, but the booklets, especially the first one, which is about death counting, how we count a COVID death. I go into this in detail.
Okay, well let's talk about that right away.
So okay, here's the most fundamental fact about COVID that the media doesn't report accurately. How stratified the risk is by age. So you mentioned people who might be overweight or have diabetes. All that stuff does add to your risk. What really adds to your risk is age. And people don't really, I think this is true of almost everybody, people don't really have a good idea of what risk is, right? So if I say, it's riskier to be old and have COVID than to be young, you might think, okay, it's like 2-1 or 3-1 or 5-1. It's kind of like normal risks. Like, what are the odds that the Jets are going to beat the Rams? Like 1 in 10, last week. And that happened. The Jets beat the Rams. This risk is not like that. It's like somewhere between 100 and 10,000 times the risk of
At what age?
So maybe 75 versus 25, 80 versus 25. If you look at who dies from this, it is overwhelmingly people over 65, 75, 85. Okay, the median age of death in European countries which are a little bit healthier than the U.S. is in the low 80s. But that doesn't really tell you the real risk, because what you need to understand is that only 2 or 3% of the population is over 82 or 83.
Now, what about people like, there was that guy who's a Broadway actor who was a young, healthy-looking guy who got sick and wound up dying from it?
So that's going to happen. So there's two issues. First of all, that happens to people with the flu. I can point you to stories from 2018. Young, healthy teacher dies of the flu. It just was never reported nationally this way.
Right.
That's A. B is, if you look at those cases, oftentimes there's weird idiosyncratic stuff happening, of which the number one thing is a lot of those people were put on ventilators very early. They were put on ventilators and they never came off. We're not having that as much anymore. And if you look, the average age of death is actually creeping up now, it looks like. And okay, so that's one, is that the risk...
Can we talk about that?
Yes.
The ventilators?
Yes.
So what happened?
So what happened was, in March especially, back when everybody was terrified, there's something called a nebulizing procedure. So there are procedures where you're inserting tubes into people, and it releases a lot of aerosols from them. And the fear was, this is going to get aerosolized, and the nurses and the doctors are all going to get sick and die, and we're going to have no medical staff. Ventilator avoids that problem. Okay, so the feeling was, let's ventilate very early. This is a really serious disease. Let's get everybody we can on ventilators. That's remember when we needed 100,000 ventilators, 200,000 ventilators? That was the idea. Okay, we're going to ventilate really early. Turns out that was a terrible idea. It turns out that, as Elon Musk likes to say, your lungs, if you ventilate too early, it's just like a meat bellows, and you can blow out people's lungs if you overventilate. And it looks like that happened. I will tell you, not that we don't use ventilators for COVID, but right now in the United States, I believe there are about 8,000 people on ventilators.
Can I stop you for a second? Yes. Like meat bellows, so like bellows, like a fireplace bellows,
yes.
Right?
So you're just pushing this air in, and like if you push it in at pressure that's too high, you can just blow out people's lungs.
So you literally destroy their lungs.
Yes, we did that with people, and it became clear. It became pretty clear pretty early on, and they tried to stop doing it, and they have stopped doing it.
So that's why they were saying that 80% of the people they put on ventilators wound up dying. It's not just that they were so sick by the time they got to ventilators they were dying.
That's right.
And they couldn't save them. It was just that the ventilators themselves
did damage. That's
wow.
Correct. And I don't think that actually too many people would argue that, even in hospitals. I can point you to stories that have been written about this, and I can point you to sort of in-hospital discussion of this. again, there is a role for ventilators for people who really cannot breathe on their own. But this early ventilation that we used back in March and April killed people. And some of the people it killed are people who were younger who probably would have survived.
My friend Michael Yo was young when he got it, and he was really beaten down. He did a lot of traveling. He flew to New York. He did morning radio, the whole deal, flew back, drove to Vegas, visited his family, and then drove home that night, and then did a bunch of auditions in L.A., and then got sick, real sick. His doctor didn't put him on a ventilator because he said, if I put you on a ventilator, your lungs are going to stop working, and you're going to die. And he's okay today because of that.
Yep.
But he's a young, healthy, robust guy, and he got it and almost died. I mean, he was really, really sick for about 2 weeks.
But he recovered,
yes,
right?
He did.
So again, we're not saying this disease isn't real, and we're not saying that some people, unfortunately, aren't going to have these bad reactions to it. But back in March, maybe he gets put on a ventilator and maybe he dies.
Well, he got it very
early. So that was so he was fortunate. He had a doctor who was smart.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one issue with the death counting is that so many of the people. So let's say and I urge people. One of the things that I've done a couple of times on Twitter that always gets an interesting response is you can go look at coroner's reports, especially in Milwaukee where they put them all online, of people who've died. So you can actually see the people who have died of COVID, and you'll see how sick they are for the most part. I'm talking about people in their 80s and 90s who have multiple severe comorbidities.
Yeah.
So in that case, it's really hard to tell. Did this person die with COVID or from COVID? If my heart is failing and my kidneys are failing and I get this thing and I die the next day, okay, I died. Did I die with COVID or did I die 2 weeks before I would have died anyway, and we're counting that as from COVID?
Or maybe even a year before you would have died anyway. But the 2.6 comorbidity factors, that's the average, right, for people that died of COVID.
That's correct.
Died with COVID.
Well,
that's a good way of saying it.
Again, it's very, very hard to distinguish with and from in these cases of people who are really sick. Now, sometimes it's not that way. Sometimes you can say, again, a 50-year-old who is relatively healthy gets COVID. They died. They died from COVID. Okay,
Yeah.
COVID killed them. We can agree about that. But many of the cases are hard to understand, or not hard to understand, but hard to distinguish. And I'll make one more point about deaths. Very, very, very important point. PCR testing. I know you know what this is, but
yes.
you look for a sample of the virus in usually it's in the nose. You multiply it, and you run a cycle where it doubles over and over and over again. And when it gets to a certain point, it's actually incredible technology. It's sort of magical, but they add a fluorescent marker to it. And at some point, if you can see the fluorescence, it's considered a positive sample. Okay. Here's the thing. A 40-cycle PCR test means that you are multiplying any original viral material in that sample by 1 trillion times. Okay, so a single viral particle that you pick up becomes 1 trillion particles. It is very, very easy to find virus in people when you're running a PCR cycle at that level. Okay, it does not mean necessarily that they're very sick at the time. It doesn't even mean that they have active virus in their bodies at the time. They could have a piece of virus that the original sample is picking up and multiplying by 40x. Okay. It's clear, by the way, when people have a low threshold, let's say 20 times, let's say it only takes 20 cycles, that's 1 million multiplications. If you're positive at 20 cycles, you're pretty sick. If you're positive at 25 cycles, you're probably pretty sick. If you're positive at 30 cycles, maybe not. 40 cycles, it doesn't really mean anything. It means that you have this one bit of virus in you that they've managed to find.
Does it mean you're contagious?
It probably doesn't mean you're contagious.
I don't like that word. I don't like that word probably.
Well,
I'm around grandma.
I don't like to say never unless I'm sure, okay?
Right.
So when I say probably, it usually means never, but I just don't like saying it.
I understand.
Okay. When we count deaths, the states have a procedure, most states. They look at positive tests and they match them with death certificates, okay? So let's say you had a positive test, okay, tomorrow, okay? And let's say it was 38 cycles. They're not going to tell you that, but it was 38 cycles, okay? You are not very sick at all with COVID, okay? But you're in a registry somewhere. Your name's in a registry. A month and a half later, you die. Let's say you get hit by a car. That will still initially come up as a positive COVID death because you had a positive test and you died within a specific amount of time after having that test.
But they don't distinguish from a violent accident?
Not initially. Now, some of the states are trying to clear this up. But let's say you died of a heart attack, Joe. Okay, a heart attack is a potential, outcome of COVID. You're always going to be on there if you died of a heart attack.
So you're saying that if you have this tiny amount of COVID in your system, you never wind up getting sick, but yet you have a heart attack a couple of weeks later, 3-4 weeks later, they will still call that a COVID death, even though you never got sick from COVID.
100%.
That doesn't seem smart.
The idea is to capture deaths as broadly as possible. The idea is this is a serious illness, and we want to know every possible person who's died from it. We don't do this with any other illness.
Is it because they don't have the resources to differentiate between the people that have died from heart attacks where it's clear, we looked at the person, they had a very small amount of the virus in their system. 4 weeks later, there's no way they were sick from that. But it's a function of decisions that have been made along the way. So they could have set the PCR threshold at lower. They could have set it at 30. They were aware from almost the beginning of this issue that, you can find a comment from Fauci in July talking about this, okay? But, and certainly they knew well before this. The idea was we want to know sort of as broadly as possible how many people have this. And then secondarily, we want to define deaths from COVID as broadly as possible. And what is the level set at currently?
Different states have different levels, but in most places it's 37 to 40 cycles, which again means that a lot of those people at the high end are not sick, and they certainly had COVID at some point, but they probably don't have it anymore. Here's the other reason to do this, Joe. If you set it really high, you're going to capture people on the way in, just as they're getting sick. So if you're truly afraid of we want to quarantine everybody really early, then you have to set the threshold really high. So that, to the extent there's a logic behind it, that's the logic behind it. But it has all these negative side effects. So there was one other point I wanted to make, but I'll remember it in a second.
So the negative side effects would be that they're inflating the number of people that not just have it but die from it because of the fact that they're making sure that these deaths that get linked within a certain time period. What is the time period?
So in some states it's 30 days, in some states it's 60 days. I don't know if it's more than 60 anywhere, but the states are sort of allowed to define it. So there's a negative for the person who's tested positive because you then have to isolate yourself. You can't work, you're scared. And then there's this negative for society with the death counts later.
Right, but isn't that negative that you have to isolate yourself and you can't work? That seems very rational because if you do test, like let's say you're on the way in, you catch it, you have a little tiny bit of it in your system and they're like, you have to isolate, you have COVID. Yes. What if that person just went out and started drinking, got run down, the COVID multiplies, and then they have a full-blown case, and then they start spreading?
So that is, look, realistically, can that happen sometimes? Yes.
That seems like that would happen a lot.
Well, it doesn't happen that much because at 37, you're asymptomatic, so you're not going to know unless you have some reason to be tested.
But isn't there a significant amount of spread from asymptomatic people?
So this is another argument that we don't... There's asymptomatic spread. It looks to be very rare, although, now Fauci's saying it's not so rare. There's pre-symptomatic spread. Pre-symptomatic spread appears to be more real.
We need another person other than Fauci. That's the one guy.
We do.
Like everyone says, Fauci says, like we have this guy.
Yes. Let me say one more thing about death count.
Yeah.
Okay. Back in March and April, people said COVID deaths are being undercounted. We're not doing enough testing. Right. There's all these people dying. They're being called pneumonia deaths. It's probably COVID. That was probably true at the time, especially in New York and New Jersey. You can look and you can see the number of what are called excess deaths, more people dying than you would expect in a normal year, was higher than the number of COVID deaths. Okay. And a lot of those deaths were in people who had pneumonia. Okay. So that looks like, hey, we didn't even, this is even worse than we thought. We're not even capturing everybody who died. Okay, but that was March and April. Let's talk about what's happening now. We know the PCR tests are going to capture a lot of people who aren't sick anymore and who maybe never were sick. We know that some of those people are going to be classified as COVID deaths. If they, again, I'm 88, I I somehow, was asymptomatic a month ago, but I got a positive PCR test. Now I die because I'm 88. That's a COVID death, okay? What we're seeing now in the United States, and certainly in Europe, we don't have data as good in the US from the last couple weeks, but we have some pretty good data from Europe and the UK, is that the number of COVID deaths, when you add it to the number of non-COVID deaths, is not as high as the overall number of deaths you would expect. So what does that tell you? That tells you that some non-COVID deaths are probably being classified as COVID deaths these days. So back in March and April, there were more people dying than you would have thought based on the number of COVID deaths. Now there are fewer people overall dying than you would think based on the number of COVID deaths. And I got to add one more thing. I know this gets complicated, but it's worth thinking about. We also know that a significant number of people are dying from lockdown. Okay, and the number one way you can look at that is overdose. Okay, overdose deaths in this country have they've been terrible for years. This year it looks like they're off the charts. So if 20 or 30,000 people, and that's probably a reasonable estimate, 20 or 30,000 extra people are dying this year from overdose alone, that should push up the number of overall deaths. And yet, then if you'd add the COVID deaths, it should be even higher. When you put these three things together, right now you're getting fewer deaths than you would expect. Again, what I'm trying to say is, I know this math can sort of seem complicated and the stacking can seem complicated, but right now it looks like a significant number of deaths that are being classified as COVID would have occurred anyway and are just sort of being shifted into the COVID pile. And that was not so true a few months ago. So when you see 3,000 people died today of COVID, until we get the true mortality figures for this year, for November and December, we're not going to know if that's really true.
I understand that people want to be cautious, right? And that's one of the reasons why they've classified things the way they have. But is there a financial incentive for hospitals to classify deaths as COVID? I have a friend, people love to make fun of me because I say these things, like I have a friend and this is what happened, but I have a friend, his grandfather died, and they never tested his grandfather, but they listed his death as COVID, and he was very old, and he was in a nursing home, but they never tested him for COVID.
So the short answer to that is it doesn't seem, and I've done a fair bit of work on this, it doesn't seem like there's a financial incentive to classify deaths as COVID or non-COVID. There's a financial incentive for hospitals to classify cases as COVID.
Okay.
Because you get, and this is known, this is not a secret, you get a 20% bump in your reimbursements if you classify cases COVID. Now, they're not going to lie, okay? That doesn't mean they're going to say, Joe went in for, whatever, surgery on his hand and he has COVID. What it means is they're going to test you for COVID.
Where are they getting this bump from?
Medicare. Yes, and the insurers typically follow Medicare.
So if you get sick and you go to a hospital, is it possible that an unscrupulous hospital would say you have COVID even if you do not?
No,
you're sick?
No,
not possible.
What they'll do is test you for it. And even if you're totally asymptomatic, you're a COVID case, you get the bump.
So
that's legal.
So that conspiracy we can eliminate. This conspiracy that the hospitals are incentivized to say that there's COVID cases that aren't.
Correct. Okay. But that's different from they're incentivized to say there are COVID cases that there are.
But what about COVID deaths? So if someone dies and there's no, are they incentivized to say that was a COVID death, even if it wasn't a COVID death?
No, but because they know you're COVID positive, if you then die in the hospital, it's going to be classified as a COVID.
It has to be, right.
By our rules.
And
yes.
Do we know, have the numbers of pneumonia, death from flu, all those things, are they different this year? Are they lower or higher?
So again, if you look back in March and April, pneumonia deaths were higher. And that's a good reason to think that we were actually undercounting COVID back then. Now, it looks like, first of all, there doesn't seem to be any flu right now, which is very weird. Either COVID has sort of pushed it aside because COVID is more effective, or we're just not testing for it.
But is it also possible that wearing the masks and this practice of socially distancing and that people being paranoid and washing their hands and all that stuff has reduced the number of flu cases?
Maybe marginally. Social distancing probably more than masks. But I don't have book 3. I'm such a genius. I didn't bring you the third one, which is all about masks.
How dare you?
But masks are probably essentially useless. Social distancing.
What?
Yes. This is
masks are useless.
Not N95s, not respirators. I'm talking about surgical and cloth masks. Probably useless.
Really?
Yes, really.
My friend Reggie Watts have you seen Reggie's mask? You got to see this. He's out of his mind. He's wearing a space helmet.
That might not be useless, but
Reggie's a trip anyway. But what he's doing is he bought this thing and he's gonna come to visit me with this thing. Play this. He's the shit. I love this dude. But play this. Look at it. Just play a little bit of it.
Hi guys, how you doing? I'm
oh Jesus.
just trying out the new helmet. Let me know if you can hear me.
So this has an
Hi,
8-hour
Hannah.
charge, and he's gonna fly here next month to visit with a fucking helmet on.
Does he have an immune system, Joe?
Oh, he does. He's healthy as fuck. He just listen. Reggie would wear that just because it's cool.
Is it cool?
He's a trip. Reggie's a trip. He's very technologically interested, so he's very.
Is
curious.
he auditioning
so
for?
This is the thing: air, HEPA filters, 8-hour usage, fan ventilation. Can you go back to that other list of the stuff that does? Neck seal, there, which I need. Everyone needs a neck seal.
Everyone needs
impermeable fabric. I also need that, and then full expression. I don't know what that means.
That sounds like it makes you come.
So this is the thing, microclimate. I mean, look at that dude. He's got his fucking glasses
cool.
on. He's from the future. This motherfucker's in a Tom Cruise movie. It's the Traveler's air mask. I'm going to get one for my mom, and she'll visit me now.
This is terrible.
My mom is so scared.
This is a terrible thing we're doing.
Yeah.
No joke.
Full face and fog-free acrylic. But this will keep you from getting sick.
Yeah, great.
Like, I'll fucking visit anybody with that bitch on. You can cough in my face.
Yeah, great.
Are you scared? Wearing that?
Yes,
I'm
scared that people would wear this.
I'm buying it right now just because you say not.
You probably sold
look at
about
the
a
filter.
million of these right now.
Good. As long as more people go visit people, I would like to visit people, man.
This is not visiting people wearing that thing.
Listen, if there's what is that? What's happening to that lady's face?
That's
Probably
not
how
good.
they sold it. This is it looks like infrared protection. I don't know.
What is going on with her face?
Yeah, that's not
Seems
good.
like she just was in a dust factory.
Okay, so that does nothing.
That does nothing.
Nothing.
Really?
Yeah, nothing.
How's it do nothing?
Because the virus. Okay, you may have seen this meme of the mosquito and the chain link fence. Like I built a chain link fence to keep out the mosquitoes?
No.
Okay, well that's the idea is that the viral particle is so much smaller than the effective ability of a standard cloth or surgical
This
mask.
is so rude.
This
But
is
doesn't it this is crazy. Don't yeah, we get it. You don't fucking cake these people up with powder. The people that are just listening, they're throwing this colored powder on these folks' faces.
I don't know why they're doing that.
Because they want to sell some masks. They sold me one. I'm buying one right now. Jamie, order it up.
Look, see?
Yeah.
They're correct, okay?
Okay.
The mask doesn't prevent you.
Okay, but look, her mouth has less. Doesn't it reduce the amount of viral load that you get? I love that word, viral load. One of my favorite expressions.
Just as it only takes one sperm to get you pregnant, it doesn't take a full, like, my coughing in your mouth to get you sick.
Okay, but let me play a devil's advocate then. If a little bit is in the air,
Yes.
and then that mask stops some of it, couldn't it possibly stop you from spreading?
Possibly.
Well, that seems like that would be a reasonable thing to do.
No. Okay.
No.
No, masks are not cost-free. Okay, they're not societally cost-free. They're not actually cost-free.
But why are we talking about costs? Let's break. We can get to costs,
Okay.
but let's talk about effectiveness first.
So here's the fact.
Okay.
People talk about a droplet. When you
Yes.
hear the word droplet, you're not a scientist. You think, oh, that's like a spit globule or
Yes.
something, right? No. All of this stuff is happening at sizes that are far, far too small for people to see. Okay.
Okay.
The virus itself is about 60 nanometers. Okay. A nanometer is 1/1 billionth of a meter. Okay. Too small for you to even imagine seeing. Okay. Most of the virus, when you exhale, it looks like, is in droplets that are smaller than 5 microns. Okay. A micron is 1/1,000,000th of a meter. 5 microns is 1/5000th of an inch.
Okay.
If you're wearing a bandana or you're wearing a cloth mask or you're wearing a standard surgical mask, even if it's fitted right, and people don't wear them right, okay, they wear them off their noses, they wear them around, it's not stopping enough of the virus to matter. If you're wearing an N95, okay, if you're actually a doctor or you care enough to put on an N95 and wear it even though it's uncomfortable and it's fitted properly, you might actually have a chance to stop some of the virus on both the way out and the way in. If you're wearing one of these regular masks, it does nothing for you to protect you. And the best you can say about this idea of my mask protects you is that there is marginal evidence that maybe it reduces some of the viral load on the way out.
Okay,
no
but
proof that makes a difference.
But it seems like that would make a difference. If you can reduce the viral load on the way out, you would reduce the amount of people that you infect.
Okay, let me give
you
you
would reduce the amount of viral load that the people that you infect take in. And that does seem to have a significant impact on whether or not you get sick, right? Like people that work in ICU wards or they're around people that have COVID.
They're wearing N95s.
But if they don't, they're taking in more viral load, right?
Uh-huh.
Rather than someone who just comes in close proximity to someone who has COVID, where you might get the tiniest amount of it and your immune system can fight it off. Doesn't it impact you how much you take in?
This is what you're saying seems plausible, but it's theoretical. There's no real evidence that you're reducing viral load enough to matter. And here's the real world proof of this, okay? Look at California right now. They are masked up. They are locked down. They are socially distanced. They are having 50,000 cases a day, okay? In the real world, whether or not you wear masks seems to make no difference to the spread of this virus.
But don't you think that one of the things that's happening with California is that people are living in close proximity to each other and they're forced to go to work? Like a lot of the people that are getting it are in poor neighborhoods. A lot of them live with multiple family members in the household and they're all on top of each other. And the fact that they're stuck inside would actually kind of accentuate the spread of this disease. But they're catching it because they have to go to work. Is that accurate?
It's not clear. So the first part of what you said is accurate.
Okay.
The virus definitely spreads inside very aggressively. The two places where it spreads the most are, in sort of these congregate settings like hospitals and nursing homes, and then when people are stuck indoors with each other for long times.
Bars seem to have had an impact because drunk talk. I would imagine drunk talk.
When you actually try to find community spread out of bars, it's hard to find in the real world. It's like maybe depending
Call Tony Hinchcliffe. That's how he got it.
That's how he thinks he got it.
That motherfucker got it from bars. He's in a bar every night. He goes to bars every night and he got it.
That's
anecdotal,
I guarantee you. Joe. It's anecdotal.
I understand. But
by the way, can I say something?
Please do.
Back in April, I was screaming, and you can go find on my Twitter feed. Don't tell fucking. I shouldn't curse. Don't tell people.
You can curse.
I know, but
on the internet.
you don't care. But like, I want to be taken seriously. I don't want to curse.
You don't think that cursing?
You can don't tell people to stay inside. Tell them to be outside. This thing spreads inside. It spreads open. You know the number one thing you could do to stop this? Open the windows. Okay? Open the windows and let fresh air in. It doesn't spread outside at all, basically. When the Chinese months ago looked at transmission, all the cases they could find, I think they found 2 cases where there was outdoor spread.
But I was reading something that was talking about the impact of the protests and that there was an uptick in the virus from the protests.
Maybe, maybe not. It's really hard to see. Just like Sturgis, it's really hard to see. What you are correct. When people have to move inside, whether it's the upper Midwest in October or Arizona in July, you see rapid spread. Okay. That doesn't prove anything either way about masks. What it tells you is the virus is airborne and can ride around, especially in closed ventilated systems.
Well, if we look at Asian countries and they have been wearing masks for a long time out of respect, right? Yes. The idea is that if you feel sick or there's something wrong, you wear a mask and it keeps you from getting other people sick.
Yes.
Is that not accurate? Like, why are they doing that?
So that's a really good question. Asian countries have had a better experience with the coronavirus, much better. We don't know exactly why. Masks are one theory. But when you look at flu in Asian countries, they have bad flu outbreaks on an almost annual basis, and even though they wear masks. Here's what I'll say about the mask. If the idea of the mask is it's a signal, I'm feeling ill, stay away from me, that makes sense, okay? That's like, hey, one person in this room is wearing a mask. He doesn't feel well. Let's give him some space. When you make everybody in the room wear the mask, the signaling is useless.
The mask does have an impact on whether or not I pay attention to you on Twitter. If you have a mask in your profile picture, generally I stay away from you because I think, oof, this poor bastard.
What if you're wearing your mask around the chin like I am?
On your profile picture? Is that what you do?
Yeah.
Well, then you're an asshole.
You join the consensus, Joe.
You're almost better off not wearing a mask. Is there any evidence? Are there papers that have been published that shows the efficacy of masks?
Yes, there are.
But you dispute them?
Well, I think, okay, define, I'm not going to say define paper. Here's the best evidence.
Okay.
The best evidence is you give a bunch of people a mask and you tell a bunch of people don't wear a mask and you see who gets sick. That study was done.
That doesn't necessarily mean they're all being in contact with the same human beings or experiencing the same amount of cases.
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, that study was done. It showed masks did not protect the wearer. The kind of study you're talking about, where you would do a cluster trial where you'd give sort of 2 cities and have one of them wear masks, everybody, and one of them not wear masks, has never been done, is basically impossible.
Well, also, that doesn't, just because there's 2 cities, like Austin has way less cases than another city.
So you ideally you try to find 2 cities that were basically at the same place on the curve.
Okay.
And you'd say, hey, city A, Des Moines versus Omaha
and
or
you
whatever.
Can surmise from the results.
Right. But that's impossible. Okay. That, first of all, you'd have to make everybody in the one city wear masks and make everybody in the other city not wear masks. And that would be unethical. People have to agree to do this. And second of all, it's just impractical. But wait, one second. So what we're left with, what the pro-mask people are left with when they talk about papers is there's really 3 kinds of papers. One is the kind that talk about the theory that you've had, which is, yay, it looks like this might reduce the viral load. Wouldn't that be a good thing? Okay, that's one kind. The second kind is what are essentially lab trials where you put a mask on a mannequin or you put it on a human volunteer and you see how many particles come in and out. The third kind is we're going to look at how things changed after a mask mandate was imposed. Okay. And so if you there are papers in all of those categories that show that masks seem to work, but they're not very good science. The good science would be the kind that I'm telling you about, and we've never done that. And the only time we've done it with trying to see if masks protect the wearer, in general, those papers, including the most recent one, this big Danish mask study, show that masks don't protect the wearer. And I'd say that most serious people don't disagree with that. The only argument is, does my mask protect you? And what I'm telling you is, yes, you can build a case for that. And it can even sound kind of plausible, but when you look at the evidence, it's not really there.
But we do agree that the larger the viral load you take in, the more likely you are to catch the disease.
We don't agree about that.
We don't.
That has not been proven. Let me give you.
Does it impact the level of the disease?
It might. Okay, but let's say my immune system is terrible. Okay, maybe I only need one virion to become sick.
Okay,
your immune system is good. You can fight off 1,000.
Right, but what if your immune system is terrible and someone doesn't have a mask on and you take in more? Would you not get sicker?
So we're at sort of a level of immunology and virology that is kind of at the limit of my understanding. So I don't want to make a definitive statement about that. But from what I have read, it is not. You'd think that was the case, right?
Yes.
But it's not clear. And let me give you a different.
But if it's not clear, wouldn't it be prudent to use it as a prophylactic?
If there's no cost to it.
So what is the cost?
Well, the costs are both societal and in that they tell everybody that this is something to be really scared of. And if you're developmentally disabled, masks can actually be frightening to you. Right. If you're a small child, masks can be frightening to you. There's a physical cost to having all these masks on the ground, and they're gross and they're trash, and they have people spit on them. Somebody has to clean those up. I mean it. Nothing is cost free in the world. That's part of the problem with this.
Right, but if it saves lives,
if it saves lives, there's no evidence it saves lives.
Have you debated anyone on this that is pro-mask?
I talk to people on Twitter about it all the time.
That is not a good debate place.
I agree.
That's not a good forum for human contact.
We agree. agree about that. But you're asking me what the cost is. I'm telling you there's a real cost to it. By the way, masks, I kind of hate having to talk about masks because masks are the thing that make me sound sort of the most like conspiracy and kind of out there because I know most people support mask wearing.
Right.
I'd rather talk about things like school closing and lockdowns.
We could definitely talk about that, but I'm talking about masks because it's such a polarizing aspect of this pandemic.
And the reason I feel I have to talk about it is because the people who are pro-mask are relying on pseudoscience. And pseudoscience has driven so much of our response to this pandemic. And so I feel I have to push back on this.
Okay, well, whether they're relying on pseudoscience or not, there's a bunch of things that they're signaling. One, they're signaling that they're compliant and that they're polite. So they're being polite to the people around them. They don't want other people to panic because people are panicking if you don't have a mask on.
Yes.
Unfortunately, that's just how it is now.
Yes.
It's weird that a year ago that was not an issue at all, ever.
Yes.
And now it's a giant issue 1 year later.
Yes.
There's never been a thing like that in our society where you've having like almost universal compliance amongst everybody in the entire country. And this is, this is something that people will argue to death over. They'll scream at you if you don't have a mask on.
Yes.
That alone, it seems like it's just easier to not be an asshole and wear a mask.
Yeah, that's the public pressure. Just like there's going to be immense public pressure to take the vaccine.
Yes. Are you going to take the vaccine?
I'm not taking the NRA ones.
Why is that?
Because they didn't exist 10 months ago. Because this virus is not particularly dangerous to me or you or my kids or my wife. And I'd rather just get it and be done with it than take a vaccine that's shown to have 17% serious side effects after the second dose in people who take it.
17%?
Yes, 1 in 6 people has a fever of 102 or higher or chills, like severe chills so this is called a grade 3 or grade 4 adverse event. Grade 3 means that you basically aren't able to function for, some period of time. Like you're not able to eat or go to the bathroom. Grade 4 means usually that you're hospitalized. Grade 5 means you die. That's the 5 stages. Grade 1 is mild, grade 2 is moderate. When I say 17% of people have had serious events after taking the vaccine, I'm defining it the way the clinical trialists define it.
So you're defining by grade 3 or 4?
Yes. Mostly grade 3, not 4.
But some have been hospitalized.
Yes. 1 in 1,000 people who got the Moderna vaccine after the second dose had a fever of 104 degrees or higher. And most of those people were taking Tylenol or Advil or other stuff to bring down the fever. Let me tell you, if you call your doctor and tell him you have 104, he's going to tell you if it doesn't go down pretty soon, you should go to the ER.
So 1 in how many again?
1 in 1,000.
1 in 1,000.
So that's a grade 4. Grade 3 is was much, much higher.
What is the numbers for grade 3?
So for fever, off the top, I want to say it was about 1.6%.
Okay, so
somewhere
in the neighborhood of
1.6
for 100.
Right, correct. Okay. 1 in 60 people. But then you look at these other adverse conditions or other adverse effects. Again, chills, nausea, vomiting.
And how long do these usually last?
Mostly 1 to 3 days.
And then on the other end of it, you have an immunity to the disease.
Yes.
Right.
Which may or may not be as lasting as natural immunity. We don't know. Trials haven't been going on that long.
Right.
There's some evidence that for the Moderna vaccine specifically, so everybody develops antibodies, but T-cell immunity is more lasting. And it's not clear that the Moderna vaccine produces complete T-cell immunity.
So T-cell immunity is produced by people that have had the disease and beat it, like young Jamie.
Yes. Then your T-cells are, if this thing comes back in your body, they're going to recognize it and they're going to ramp up your immune response. By the way, sorry.
Go ahead. Please don't. Go ahead.
So people, look, I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I was vaccinated. My kids have all had the normal vaccine schedule. This is different to me for a couple of reasons, okay? This technology is very new. These have not been in humans before, okay? This is not something that we've been working on for 50 years. And the virus itself, unfortunately, what it looks like is, the virus itself is quite dangerous to people, again, in their 80s, their 70s, 75 and over, you could say is the break point. The adverse responses go the other way. It looks like the younger you are, the more serious they are. So what I tell my mom, if she says to me, you know what, I think I should get this. You know what, Mom, you're 76, your lung function is not great, go ahead.
So the younger people who get the vaccine are having more adverse side effects?
Yes, that's correct. That's quite clear.
Is this because of
Because
a
their
cascade immune system?
Their immune systems are more robust, likely is the reason. But it's not clear yet because there's a reason, Joe, that drugs usually take 5, 8, 10, sometimes 15 years to go from idea to human. We did this in 10 months. There's a lot we don't understand about this. So my mother, go ahead, get the vaccine. Certainly if you're 80 and you're in a nursing home, get the vaccine, okay? It can't be worse than dying from COVID.
Right.
But me, I don't.
How old are you?
I'm 47. And I'm in reasonable shape. I'm not in great shape, but I'm in reasonable shape. I'll take my chances. I'd rather wait for a vaccine that isn't based on this mRNA technology. And my kids, now my kids are under 18, so right now they're not eligible for this. But there's no way on earth they're getting this vaccine.
Do you worry that there will be a forced compliance?
I worry that there will be quasi-mandates. You can already see this happening where essentially, you know what? You don't have to get vaccinated, but if you ever want to go to a concert again, you have to get vaccinated.
Right.
If you ever want to get on an airplane again, you have to get vaccinated, but you don't actually have to get vaccinated.
Right.
I don't think that's right. I think this should be a personal decision for people.
Do you think that it's possible that a treatment could exist? Like if you have certain things, you get penicillin. If you have something else, you take this, like some proven, clear treatment where we no longer have to think this way.
I doubt that's going to happen. That doesn't exist for the flu. You have these sort of antiretrovirals, but they don't work that well.
That is a thing where there's never been a cure for the common cold.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean,
and
so
the common cold is a coronavirus, correct?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. So bacteria. There are other kinds of viruses that can also cause the common cold. Rhinoviruses, adenoviruses, but the coronaviruses cause the common cold too. What you're talking about with penicillin is those are bacteria.
Right.
So those are generally more susceptible to treatment. These viruses were just not that good at treating. Oh, I wanted to say one last thing about the particles, and you mentioned, how many particles, possibly it's more particles, is more likely to get you sick. The size of the particles might also matter. So with anthrax, famously, if an anthrax spore gets into your lungs, it's terrible. I mean, you have like about an 80% lethality rate of anthrax getting into your lungs. If it gets into just your nose, it doesn't do that. Okay, it has to get all the way down. So it is possible, and I'm not saying this is true, it is possible that by filtering out larger particles, as masks do, what you're left with is more dangerous particles that are more likely to get into your lungs. So again, I'm not saying that's true. What I'm saying,
wouldn't you get those same particles if you had no mask?
That's actually a good point. But the mix might be more both upper and lower respiratory. But again, I'm not saying that's something we have to be afraid of. What I'm saying is when you're talking about plausible theories like your plausible theory, you don't know. You need experimental data. And the experimental data is not very strong for mask use. Just to go back to that.
My rationale for the way that masks work or don't work is the most crude. It's farts. They go right through your underwear, right through your pants, and they'll go right through your fucking mask. So, are we saying that COVID is not as dense as farts?
Well, methane is smaller than the COVID.
Is it?
Yeah, methane is very CH3. It's or CH4, I guess. But no, it's small.
Okay. So maybe Reggie has a point with that if he's going to fly.
If he's going to
One of
fart, too.
The worst things that happens on a plane is people farting in that tube.
When I was flying down yesterday, somebody was farting up a storm.
That's
so
how
gross.
it goes. People
So
are
gross.
fucking nasty. They eat bad food or they just don't care that people are around them. What do you think has been the best argument for masks? Like you said, you've been debating people or going back and forth with people on Twitter. What's been the best argument for masks? Has anybody made a rational?
Yeah, not to we're back to the fart thing. Not to kiss your ass, but it's the one that you make. It's that this could lower the viral load and possibly lead to some. Maybe some people who would have been infected don't get infected. Maybe some people would have been seriously infected don't get as seriously infected. I don't think the logic is particularly strong, but I think that's a case you can make. The idea that my mask protects me, you just can't make a case for it.
But it would protect you if we're talking about a distribution of the viral load. Then it's got to be protecting you in the same fashion that it's protecting other people from you.
Well, no. I mean,
If it's reducing the amount of viral load, it's got to be reducing it intake as well as outtake, no?
No, because what's airborne, right, what's around after a few minutes is all tiny. So
Okay.
maybe it catches these droplets on
Coming
the way out. But once it's very clear, they evaporate almost immediately. So, and you can find, they've done really interesting, I mean, there's been so much fascinating science around this. They've plucked essentially floating virus out of the air in hospital rooms. It is airborne. There's no question about that.
Now, who are the people that you've been going back and forth with on, you don't have to name them on Twitter, but have these been doctors, virologists? Have these been
Yes.
biologists? Who have these people been?
Lot of, all of the above.
And what has their take been?
That I'm an asshole.
You're an asshole.
That doesn't care if people get sick and die, and doesn't understand the science and lies. One of them called me a liar a bunch, and then I said I might sue her, which anything's possible. And she sort of stopped calling me a liar. She also later admitted basically that masks don't work to protect the wearer, which was really interesting after she'd been criticizing me. But yes, they don't like me. They say I'm cavalier about this, that I'm cruel to older people, and that I'm selfish.
It's there's a virtue signaling thing going on as well that is unfortunately just a general part of communication through social media today. That if you're not in compliance, if you're a rebel, if you go outside the lines and you say something, hey, I don't think this is the right way to do it, people get very angry. People were very angry at people saying that maybe these lockdowns were a bad idea 8 months ago.
Yes.
That now it's the general consensus that the lockdowns are terrible. The only people that seem to like the lockdowns are people that are independently wealthy and or really crazy progressive people that think the government should pay for everything and that we should siphon off the money from the wealthy people to, pay people's mortgages and rents. And there's a lot of that discussion, which is, there's some logic to it. Like, why should corporations be getting bailed out, and why shouldn't people that need their rent and their mortgage paid get bailed out? Like, this doesn't make any sense. And if you look at the bill that was passed, I mean, I went over it last night, and there's a lot of weird shit in there. Like, why are we giving all this aid to foreign countries in this bill? Why is there a part of this aid bill that makes it a felony to illegally stream? Like, how does this happen? They sneak things into these fucking bills. These people are monsters. They really are. Like, this should have been a real clear-cut thing. Aid to people that have lost all their income because of this, and they need a stimulus. The fact that they added in a felony provision for people who stream movies and profit from them. Like, what the fuck is going on? Like, how is...
You're not going to hear me disagree. Look,
why is Pakistan getting money? Why is Israel getting? Did you see it, Jamie? It's bizarre. I don't understand the logic behind it. I don't understand how this got agreed to.
Well, what happens is the idea is this thing's going to pass anyway, so you help out your favorite lobbyist, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, you sneak something in.
Is that what it is?
Yeah, that's clearly how it goes.
Fucking people.
I mean, here's what I'll say, okay? This is why Tell Your Children actually matters in this debate, okay? I wrote this book, and you can say...
That's the pot book for folks.
Yeah. You can say, like, this guy, like, he doesn't understand. A lot of people just like to get high, and they can handle it. It shouldn't be criminal. And, minorities bear the burden here. It's wrong. Let's legalize. Okay. Totally reasonable. And by the way, alcohol kills a whole lot of people. It's legal. It's advertised on TV. It's legal. The rules should be the same. I totally get that. Okay. If you read the book, it's about something else. It's about this is psychiatrically harmful to a lot of people, and we're not talking about it.
Yes.
And by the way, there's a downstream violence that comes from that sometimes that we're not talking about either. Okay.
Yes.
To me, those things, if you read the book with an open mind, are pretty factual and inarguable. It doesn't mean, by the way, that you can't then say cannabis should still be legal. You can read the book and agree with it and say, but you know what? It should still be legal for those other reasons. Fine. That is not the way the book was treated last year. Okay? It was, you hate black people, you don't understand science, you're cherry picking, go to hell. Okay? So when I saw this happening this year with COVID, and I saw the New York Times where I used to work, and you know what? People can yell at me for saying I used to work there, but I worked there for 10 years, and I was a really good reporter there, and I'm not going to back down from my credentials because I am a good reporter. You can say, you can say, you know what, like lockdowns are necessary and we need to protect these old people. And you know what, we can't let the hospitals get overrun. But if I present evidence to you that's contrary, don't just shout at me that I'm an idiot and don't know what I'm talking about. Okay. It's not going to work. It didn't work with Tell Your Children, and it's not going to work this time. Okay. So, and what I recognized was that unfortunately, and in sort of the elite levels of the media, you know, the Times, the Washington Post, NPR, CNN, the groupthink is overwhelming.
Yes.
It's overwhelming on cannabis, and it's overwhelming on all these woke progressive issues. And it's gotten much, much worse since I left the Times 10 years ago. And I don't know what's going to turn it around. Okay. And it has terrible effects. Let me give you one example. Okay. We should all want to know where this virus came from. I don't care whether you're Republican or Democrat, liberal, conservative. I don't care what country you live in. You should want to know if this is the result of a Chinese lab accident. And there's some evidence of that. We can talk about that later. Okay. And you should at least want to know that there's been a complete independent investigation into this. Okay. This thing has messed up the world in a mammoth way this year. Okay. And at the least, we should want to know where it came from if it did come from some kind of accident. I'm not saying the Chinese released it intentionally. I'm saying there might be evidence that there was an accident. Because if that happened, we better make sure it never, ever, ever happens again.
It's a very strange thing to me that people don't want to even investigate it. They don't want to look at it. And I think they're afraid of racism or something. There seems to be some sort of indication that there's a victim blaming thing. There's an aspect to it that also is anti-Trump.
That's it.
Yeah.
It's anti-Trump. Okay.
Yeah.
What happened in March was the progressive media. First of all, they were terrified because of what was happening in New York, what seemed to be happening in New York. And they all thought they were going to die. And then once they realized they weren't all going to die, they realized that they could beat Donald Trump over the head with this and he would lose the election. And they did, and he did. And look, I'm neither a Republican nor a Democrat.
What are you?
I'm an independent. Basically, as I have said, my politics are that it's impossible to be too cynical. Just like you said with the bill that they just passed, it's impossible to be too cynical about the way these people behave. They behave terribly. Okay, but so why is it that the New York Times won't even write stories about the fact that there's real questions about where this virus came from? Forget the ventilators, forget the U.S. response, forget Donald Trump. We should be asking that question. The groupthink is so serious that basic questions don't get asked right now.
Well, we were criticized on the podcast because I had Brett Weinstein, who's an evolutionary biologist, who discussed all the reasons, scientific reasons, why there's evidence that indicates that this is not a virus that naturally occurred.
That's right.
And also, just by coincidence, there happens to be a level 4 lab in Wuhan.
That's right.
What are the odds?
Right.
Like, you would think that people would want to put those two together, but it was something from the beginning that this groupthink was established, that you are not to question that. And there was a whole article written about how I'm promoting this dangerous conspiracy theory that that this came from a lab that's been disproven. But it hasn't been disproven. It
has not been disproven at all.
No, it hasn't been disproven. There's never been a real solid proof of where this has come from.
That's right.
Here nor there.
That's right. And actually, you'd say the evidence is sort of going the other way now. I mean, in favor of this. And here's why. If this thing originally came from some animal, right? We know that there was a virus that was 96% similar to it that they had at that lab, okay? But we've never found the virus that's 99% similar in an animal, which is what we would expect to find, okay? That there'd be something really close that then made the jump from whether it's a civet cat or a bat or a mink or whatever to a human. They've never been able to find that.
Why was the connection with pangolins? Why did they think it was...
So the virus is 96% bat, it looks like, very, very similar. And then near the most important part of it, the part of it that binds to this receptor on your cells that enables it to get in, it's called the receptor binding domain, is pangolin, okay? So it just happens that it's a perfect cut of mostly this virus that we know was in this lab, this bat virus, with a pangolin virus, with a tiny addition that enables it enables the spike to attach more efficiently. Okay, it's called the furin cleavage, and again, we're at sort of the limits of my knowledge. I don't want to talk too specifically about it, but somehow this virus just happens to be mostly bat, a little bit pangolin, and we can't find any evidence of a virus that's like that to a 99 percentile in the wild. And believe me, don't you think the Chinese have looked in the last year? Or wouldn't they have looked if they thought they could find something? When SARS came, the original SARS, not SARS-CoV-2, they had found the viral host within a matter of months. I mean, the zoonotic one, the animal viral host, in a matter of months. And they published a paper on it. There's been nothing like that. Now, you can choose to believe that's because, you know what, it's just in some cave in China that they haven't found the real thing yet. Or you can choose to question, as you said, there's this level 4 BSL lab in Wuhan where this thing happens to seemingly have emerged from. Coincidence.
Crazy coincidence.
Yeah. But we're not allowed to talk about that.
Yeah. If you talk about it, you're a Trump supporter. Yeah. The groupthink it's so strange with social media because the consequences of being attacked are so real. People do get emotionally devastated by these gang attacks, and they are very bullying. I mean, they really are bullying gang, and people don't think of it as bullying because you're not physically in front of someone and you're not intimidating them and scaring them, but you know what you're doing.
Oh yeah.
They know what they're doing.
Oh yeah.
And when they go after you and they see other people going after you, they go, "Oh, it's a free shot at Alex."
Yeah, it's
let's
dogpiling.
Let's go after him.
It's ugly.
Yeah.
And I've learned that, like, you know, there was one thing in May where I really got dogpiled, and the only thing to do is not to respond, to turn the computer off for a few hours and just let it go. Because the one thing about the mob is when they realize they can't touch you, when they realize that, like, they can't get you fired, that you have some independence, they will generally move on. But if they can touch you, they will. So I got my one last book here. The reason that I am able to write about this stuff in the way that I've been is because after I left the Times in 2010, I wrote spy novels for a number of years, and I was paid pretty well. I was fortunate. I had a good. This novel, believe it or not, I wrote in 2019. It's called Power Couple. That is yours to keep.
Oh boy.
Yes.
Did you make an audio version?
There is an audio version. Steven Weber is the guy who did it.
Steven Weber from Wings?
I think so. Yeah.
No kidding. Yeah. Really? I met that guy back in the day. We were both on NBC together. Nice guy.
But he said he liked the book, by the way. He talked it up.
Oh, that's cool.
But so I'm fortunate. Like, I wrote these John Wells novels for a number of years, and I wrote this book, which I finished, again, fortunately, before all this happened. And so as long as people are willing to buy my fiction, I can tell the truth in my nonfiction. I'm not owned by the Times or anybody else, and I'm lucky. I wake up every day thinking how lucky I am to be in that position.
That's the only reason why I can do this podcast. The reason why I can do this podcast is I don't have a boss. If I had a boss, and
your audience trusts you.
Well, I appreciate that. I'm glad they do. And I'm honest. I do my best. I'm wrong often, but if I'm wrong, I'll tell you. But I don't think any of this would be possible if I worked for some large corporation that had to give in to the mob. You know, I just don't think I'd be able to have you on. I don't think I'd be able to. There's a lot of topics.
I mean, they came after you with the trans stuff, right?
Yeah. Well, Abigail Schreier's book, yeah, and also with the trans athletes thing. It's just it's these concentrated attacks and this distortion of who you are. Like, I don't mind if you're upset at who I actually am, but when you distort who I am and what my positions are on things just because you want people to attack me, then people are not going to trust you now. And that's one of the things that's happened to the people that know me from this podcast. They know me from 1,500 plus episodes that are more than 3 hours long often. They know who I am. So if you say that I'm this hateful person just wants to attack trans people, no, I'm like, I love everybody. And Eddie Izzard's one of my favorite guests ever.
He's great.
It's a she now. She's now. She's decided she used to go back and forth, right? Now she's decided that she is in girl mode all the time. I love that person, whatever they choose to be, girl, boy. She's still calling herself Eddie. It's like, great.
I remember an off-Broadway thing with, I guess I should say her, maybe 20 years ago. It was one of the funniest things I'd ever seen.
Awesome human being, and one of my favorite guests ever. My position was about an MMA fighter that wasn't telling people that they were male for 30 years, were only female for 2, and then were fighting unbeknownst to females, and beating the fuck out of them. And I was like, this is crazy. And the only reason why I jumped in is because you've entered into my world now. Now you're into the world of fighting. Like, I'm a martial arts expert. You can't tell me there's no difference between male and female frames, and male and female power, and there's a lot of variables, and you can't deny those variables just because you want to be woke. And then people, the response to that is it's disturbing, but ultimately it will do them in because people know what it is, and the reaction to it has been less and less effective. People realize it's more and more thought of as being hysterical and not based in reality.
But it's a dangerous time, Joe, because so Trump lost. There's lots to dislike about Donald Trump, and who I voted for doesn't matter. But it's disturbing that in anonymous polls before the election, basically 1 in 10 Trump supporters wouldn't tell pollsters that they were going to vote for him. Right? I mean, the fact that they're that afraid of that people believe that the consequences of them may be so severe that they're not even allowed to talk anonymously about who they're going to vote for, that is not a healthy sign for our democracy or anything else.
Yeah, it's not a healthy sign for communication. But it's also like he's such a polarizing guy. It's just he's the wrong guy for that. I think he's the right guy for people to understand that it is possible for someone who's outside of the system, who understands the system, to win and become president. Yes. He's the wrong guy to unite America because he's so fucking polarizing. I think
he's so personally difficult to like.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, but he's the king of the assholes. This is what I said. I was like, the assholes have a king. Like, they never had a king before. Like, no politician was an open, unapologetic asshole. Yes. He's the first one.
Yes.
And they're like, yes, that's my fucking guy. And so they felt like you look at some of the behavior of some of the Trump supporters, it's empowered by him.
Yes.
People do need a leader that represents better.
Yes.
Right? And that's what I think one of the best things about Obama is that he represented composure, intelligence,
civility,
articulation. And the composure is huge, man.
Yep.
Because under pressure, he was never like yelling at reporters.
Yep.
He was always like, well, calm down. Let's handle this. Let's discuss this.
Yep.
It was all measured, and it made you feel like that guy's better than me, smarter than me. He should be president. With Trump, you're like, shut him the fuck up. Like, why is he yelling? He's lying about this. Yes. He's lying about the number of people at his inauguration. Yes. And this is just like what has made him. Oh no! How dare you? That's made him an extremely popular television host. This braggadocious behavior, this fact that he was like, you're fired. Fuck you. I'm the king. That kind of shit.
Yes, but on the flip side, he did something terrible to the media. He drove them crazy.
Yes.
He drove them so crazy that they would essentially said, you know what? Anything goes to get this guy out.
Yes.
And if we have to lie about it, he's lying. So F him. We're going to lie too.
It's dangerous.
It's dangerous.
Then there could be someone who's like maybe not nearly as offensive, but not the person they want into office, and they might use the same strategy and tactics because they've already been sanctioned.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So and that is what's happened with COVID. Okay. COVID, our response to COVID is dangerous in and of itself, but it is even more dangerous as a signal of both legacy and tech censorship of ideas that don't fit the sort of Silicon Valley, DC, New York norm. And that is a bad place to be.
Yeah, I agree. And I also think there's a thing that's going on where people had locked into a mindset that they had at the beginning of the pandemic where this is going to devastate the population and kill a bunch of people, or a large percentage, I should say, of the people, like 10% or whatever the fuck that get it. And that didn't turn out to be the case. But we're still locked into that same mindset.
Well, yeah, and it's funny. You said a few minutes ago, you said, well, lockdowns don't work. Everybody agreed on that. You may think everyone agrees on that, but look at what's happening.
I think there's a lot more people that are not in support of lockdowns, particularly people that are in danger or have already lost their business, restaurants, and the fact that why is it okay to go to Walgreens, but it's not okay to dine outside in California?
That's right. Why is it okay to go to Walmart, but not to go to a church, right? So, but yet it's still happening. You know, in my state in New York, they're talking about a complete lockdown again. It's as if we've learned nothing in the last few months. And as you know, as you and I were sort of starting to say a few minutes ago, there's actually evidence that lockdowns are counterproductive because they force people into their homes,
Right.
and most transmission happens inside, not outside.
So what do you think would be the best strategy to try to mitigate the amount of people that get sick?
So
if it's not lockdowns?
There's not. The truth is, people don't like hearing this. Okay, there's not that much you can do once this becomes endemic. Okay, so if you're not New Zealand, okay, if you can't sort of close your borders and quarantine everybody for 14 days and be some island in the Pacific with 5 million people, basically there's a few things you have to do, right? You have to stand up the hospitals and make sure they have adequate equipment, and that you know, if there's a regional real crisis, that you get some extra nurses and doctors in there. You need to, you know, encourage people who are sick to stay home. You know, that's been good advice forever. If you're sick, stay home. If you have to go out, wear a mask if you're sick. Okay? If you're sick, not everybody.
This is the problem with people that work by the hour and don't get paid if they're sick.
That's hard for them. Yes.
Gig workers.
So should we help those people? Yeah, I think we should. You know, the simplest thing is called respiratory etiquette. What that means is sneeze into your nose. Okay, if you're out and you're sick, sneeze into your nose.
Sneeze into your nose.
I'm sorry, sneeze into your elbow.
Oh.
This. Sneeze into your
Like,
nose.
how the fuck are you sneezing?
If you can do that, you're impressive. Wash your hands. There's not actually great evidence that hand washing does anything, but we should all be washing our hands. It's a good idea. And you know, in moments when there's a big surge, would it make sense to sort of shut down, you know, let's say arenas? I mean, those are all shut down already, but like I'm talking about if we had a more normal response to this. So you say we'll postpone a concert.
Right.
Maybe we'll close bars. Okay. That's about it, Joe. The problem is that doesn't get Tony Fauci on TV every day. That doesn't get Governor Cuomo, you know, a book deal and on TV. When you say to people, you know what, we're going to get through this. We're going to function as a society. This is, you know, oh, and look, if there's a way to protect nursing homes, because almost half the people who are dying from this are dying in nursing homes or congregate care settings. So those people are the people who are vulnerable. Maybe, you know, is there a way to sort of like try to install better ventilation in those nursing homes? Is there a way where staff should be tested every day? And if you have a positive case in a nursing home, that person gets moved. Yes, maybe there are things we could do. Unfortunately, the idea of closing off nursing homes is not a great idea. And here's why. Look, those are not great jobs. Those are tough jobs for people. And one of the ways that you can be sort of sure that people are actually being taken care of, the residents in the homes, and they're not being neglected, is having family members come in, right? So the person who, you know, is demented and is, you know, shitting themselves is getting cleaned up and not getting bed sores. Having family members keep an eye on nursing homes is unfortunately kind of necessary. And by the way, even if that's not happening, with these people with Alzheimer's or dementia, when they don't have families, you know, they just sail off into space if people are not visiting them and talking to them and trying to keep them there. And it's pretty clear that deaths of people with Alzheimer's and dementia are up this year, independent of COVID, again. And that's because they're being neglected in these nursing homes. So shutting off nursing homes from society, even though it sounds like a good idea, we got to protect these people, isn't necessarily a great idea. In general, the idea should have been, we're going to do the minimum to sort of make things work, and we're going to manage through this. Once we realized it wasn't the plague, once we realized that 10% of people weren't going to die, that, you know, somewhere between 997 and 999 out of 1,000 people who get this will survive. It still means that people are going to die, and it still means, you know, it's a big country, it's a big world. The numbers can look kind of ugly. We should have said, the idea is going to be not to screw up society. We're going to, and by the way, here's the one thing, Joe, and I will go to my grave being furious about this. The schools should have stayed open, and they should have, and to the extent they closed, they should have reopened within weeks. Okay, that's what they did in Europe. That's what they continue to leave them open even now, even when they had this second wave.
But what about the children transmitting it to the parents or the grandparents?
It's almost always the other way. Kids don't get very sick from this, and they clear it very quickly. When you look at transmission, when they've really researched it, they find it tends to go the other way. There's some
children that live in a household with multiple family members, including multiple generations.
They don't get very sick. It goes the other way.
What do you mean?
In other words, with the flu, children are big vectors. Children,
Okay.
they spread the flu around.
Right.
With COVID, it doesn't seem to happen.
It doesn't seem to happen.
But
Is it
when
because the schools are shut down?
No. When they've
But don't you
traced,
think that that's a significant factor?
no.
But hold on. If all the schools are shut down,
Yeah.
and you're saying that there's no factor with the children getting it in school and transmitting it to their parents or their grandparents, how would we know? That the schools are
Because
shut down?
they've contact traced in places where the schools are open, and they found that they don't usually. Again, I say usually. You can pick on me and say it's not
Right.
always. In general, the transmission is adult to child.
Right. The thing is, though, we're trying to stop the spread as much as possible. So this is where the masks, like, it could possibly get some people sick. Those people get sick and spread to other people. This is a cascade effect, right? It's not as simple as like the children don't usually give it to the grandparents. Well, they might give it to the grandparents. The grandparents might give it to the parents. They might give it to their friends. They might give it to more people, and then it spreads.
Sure, and I might get hit by lightning when I go
But
outside.
it's not that simple.
It
It's
is
not
that simple with
because
schools.
it's not raining outside. You're not going to get hit by lightning.
Okay, but the schools, closing schools, all the stuff you said might,
Yes.
closing schools is real and enormous and
It is
negative.
No argument. No, it has a massive impact on kids.
And
I've
on
seen
adults.
It, and on adults. I've seen it on my own kids. I've seen it, and I know there's people also that are single parents that don't have someone to watch their children, and they don't know what to do.
Yep.
And then it's horrible. There's a lot of factors here that we have to take into consideration.
I don't agree with this one. I think there's one factor, and it's that the children are at very low risk from this. Most teachers are at very low risk. The average teacher in the United States is 42 years old. 42-year-olds, I'm not going to say never die from this, but they're not at high risk from this. The schools should be open, and they should have stayed open. And yes, there's this theory. Yeah, you can, if grandma's living at home, can a child get it and spread it? I'm not going to say that's never happened, but when you look at the contact tracing that's been done, it's very, very rare.
I know of a college kid who gave it to his dad, and his dad went to the hospital.
Okay.
Yeah, he got it out partying and lived with his parents. I think he's 20, 21, somewhere in that range. Gave it to his dad, and his dad wound up in the ICU.
Okay. So
it
it does happen. But by the way,
Yeah.
20 is not. We're talking. That's different.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not. So college, the risk is somewhat high. I'm talking about with elementary school kids
Okay.
and even high school.
Right.
So first of all, again, it looks like the risk on this, if you're sort of under 15 for you, is close to zero.
Well, once it was established that it's not the risk for the actual children themselves is extremely low. My question, when they were like, we've got to protect these children, this was the talk of my kids' old school. I was like, well, what do you do when it's the flu?
That's right.
You don't do shit.
That's right.
And those kids could die of the flu.
That's right. The flu actually kills kids.
It
sometimes.
kills kids. It kills thousands of kids a year.
It kills kids. It doesn't
Well,
kill
a
thousands
good
of years.
a good flu year will kill 100,000 people. Correct? Like a bad year.
The worst year we've had recently, the initial estimate was 80,000. They revised that down to 60. That was 2017.
Well, let's say
2018.
60. You don't think that 1,000 of those are kids?
No, I think the worst year for that actually, and we could check this, so I shouldn't say no definitively.
Okay.
But
Okay, let's say hundreds.
Hundreds. In 2009, the swine flu for some reason was very dangerous to kids relatively, and more than 1,000 kids died.
Okay.
So
that's a rare one.
That's a
where
rare
more
one.
than 1,000 kids died.
Yes.
It says the high year is 188
Kids.
reported kids.
Kids. What is the number for kids dying of COVID? There's a problem with that too, man, because they want to. I saw this one. I think they said otherwise healthy kid dies from COVID, and then I looked. He was 400 pounds, and he had diabetes.
It's just the table from the CDC, so it's
Okay, get to 1 to 4, 18 kids.
So
Okay,
under
that's
15,
crazy.
Under 15, there's been fewer than 100 children. There's about 60 million people in that age range, and fewer
Okay.
than 100 have died this year of COVID. And a lot of those deaths are overcounted.
It is interesting when you look when it gets 15 to 24, it goes way up.
So
458, it goes up by 10.
yeah,
Tenfold. Look at that. That's interesting.
Yes. No, you
5
can
to
see it's-
14, 47, but 14 to 24 it goes up to 458. You know what that's from? Partying and fucking. You dirty little kids. Stay home. You're all drinking
seriously,
and not getting any sleep.
take a look how parabolic it is. It doubles in every one of those brackets. More
Interesting
than doubles.
how, yeah, look, it keeps going up and up and up.
Yep.
Yeah. That is interesting. 55 to 64 it goes up to 33,000, and then 65 to 74 it goes up to almost 60,000.
Right. This is what I'm telling you. People don't understand how skewed it is. And 85 and over, that's 87,000. But there aren't the same number of people in that bracket.
Right. And those people are already on death's door.
Yes.
Well, respectfully. That's just how it is.
No, look, here,
85
go.
years old.
So 80. So there are 6 million of those people, and 830,000 have died this year anyway. Okay, being 85, you don't have that much candle left.
Right, there's not much left, and the flu could also do you in.
Yes.
Yeah. This is it's such a polarizing subject. You're not allowed to look at it. You're only supposed to go with whatever the orthodoxy is. There's a dogma that you have to stick to. It's almost religious. It's real weird with this. Like, you can't question or talk about it, or people start attacking you.
So if you think back to HIV, it's actually very interesting. So HIV in the 80s, by 85, 86, I think the virologists were aware how it was spread. Right, it was spread through blood, it was spread through sex, especially anal sex, and they were aware of who was at risk. And they kind of made a decision at first: we're not going to tell the truth about that. We're going to try to scare everybody. Because if we focus on...
I remember.
Remember?
Oh, my God. I remember I was in my car. I lived in Revere, Massachusetts, and I found out that Magic Johnson got AIDS.
That's right.
That's what we heard. He had HIV, never got AIDS. But I was in my car, and I was like, oh, my God. It was like a scene in a movie where the zombie apocalypse. Like the scene in 28 days later where they let the chimp out, and he attacks the lady, and she gets the rage.
Yep.
I was like, fuck, we're doomed.
We're all going to die. It turned out it wasn't true at all. But here's the problem, okay? So the people who did this did it with the intention of, we don't want to marginalize gay people or, IV drug users. The problem was they didn't focus prevention on those people. And so those people, to some extent, didn't realize that how much risk they had. And finally, what happened was gay groups especially said, like, we're at risk here. We know it. We need to focus. You need to focus the efforts on us so that we will, actually reduce our risk.
Right.
And once they did that, once the government stopped sort of, lying about who was most at risk by far, behavior did start to change, and eventually things got better. So that's sort of happening with this in a hundredfold. We're not being honest. So a lot of people who are at very low risk are terrified. Right. A lot of these, middle-aged people and young people, young millennials, they're scared to death of this thing for no reason. And our societal response has been completely screwed up.
The AIDS one is so strange because I remember being convinced that we were going to lose a giant percentage of the population. And it wasn't just going to be gay people. It was going to be everybody. I remember when I got my first HIV test for health insurance, I was terrified. Terrified. I think I may have been 22 or something like that at the time. I don't remember how old I was. But I was like just thinking of all the terrible decisions I've made, just running them through my head.
The awesome, terrible decisions you made.
And I'm like, fuck. But it didn't turn out to really have a large impact on the heterosexual community.
No.
It didn't,
and
which
the
is
people
weird.
It's not weird. It's a function of the virus, okay?
I know, but it's still weird that it didn't.
Just like everything that's happened with this virus is a function of the virus.
I know, but I'm not saying that it's not logical. It's clearly logical, right? But I'm saying these things that you think are going to be the end of the world and aren't. We never seem to. No one wants to bring any of that up. Like, you might be bringing it up now because you're kind of a guy that's not afraid to talk about controversial subjects like that. But that's not something that you're going to see Fauci discuss, who was at the forefront of the fear campaign.
That's right.
He was the guy that was telling us we're going to lose 50% of the people. Like, he was saying some crazy shit back in the day.
I don't know if he ever said that, but
I'm just making that up. Hyperbole for sure.
But he did say, I believe it was in 1983, that he thought sort of casual household transmission was a possibility with HIV. There's a paper that he wrote. Yep, we can find it. If it's not worth finding, but we can find it.
Well, he was also a guy that told you not to wear masks.
That's true.
That was weird.
That was when they were telling the truth about masks, Joe. They stopped telling the truth about masks.
Well, he said the only reason why he did it was because he didn't want people to go out and buy masks, and then healthcare workers and first responders weren't able to get them.
Bullshit.
You think it's bullshit?
Yeah, because N95s actually work, okay? He didn't say don't wear an N95. Like, he said surgical masks don't really work. They had enough surgical masks. They never ran out of surgical masks. There was a chance of a run on N95s.
Right, but wasn't that his logic though?
Well,
that
then he should
he thought
have. Then he should have
people were
said,
gonna go out
"Don't buy
and them?"
N95s."
Yeah, but if you say don't buy N95s because they work,
then everyone's going to go buy N95s.
I mean,
That's
yeah,
true.
I mean, I think his logic it holds true. The problem is once you say that, and then you say, "Hey, I was lying. I didn't want you to buy a mask." Well,
Yeah.
now you've already opened the door to the fact that you might lie to us.
That's right.
That's a problem.
I agree.
Yeah.
Wait for the vaccine. This downplaying of the side effects. It's crazy for them to do that. They're much too widespread to hide the side effects, especially the second dose.
I've had a lot of people. I've had people on this podcast even that are just so gung ho about the possibility of getting this vaccine. They want to do it. And then I brought up the side effects. They start debating like they know for a fact that it's not true or you're not going to. And so then I had this one guy and I played the video of Bill Gates talking about how 80% of the people who got the second dose got really sick.
We can look it up. The Moderna trial data. Look. I am not running around saying I've got a source inside the CDC or like some guy slipped me a thumb drive with secrets. My sources are public. And that's one of the things about the booklets, okay? Everything I put in there that's important, you can go check the original. It's, the hyperlinks are on the ebooks. They're all in here. You can check it for yourself and see if what I'm saying is correct and true to the source.
Do you think it's possible that, if people survive the vaccine, if they get, I think
most
there's going to be a
people
very
will survive the vaccine.
very small amount of people that are going to hit level 4, right?
Sure.
What would you say with stage 4?
So in the case of fever, it's more than 104 degrees.
Right.
It's stuff that requires hospitalization.
Stage 4.
Yeah.
So there's going to be a very small number
Grade
of people.
4, sorry,
Grade 4. Very small number of people that hit grade 4.
Yes.
Is it possible that people could die from it?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, there's a certain number of people who get 104-degree fever who are going to die. I mean, I don't know what the percentage is. I'm sure we could, look in the journal of
But would you
fevers
agree that it's probably lower than the number of people that are going to die from COVID-19?
Overall, yes. But
Right.
here's where the age thing matters. Remember, the curve is this for the for the risks of COVID by age, and it's this for the risks of vaccine by age. So
what you're doing is making a V. You're going up, down,
sort
and
of
down.
making,
It's for audio people
yes,
only.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that just listen.
So
and they're going, "What the fuck is this and this?"
What is he talking? So the risk of the vaccine increases as you are younger. It looks like.
Why is that?
Again, probably because you have a stronger immune response when you're younger. So
The dumbest thing was that one lady who's a nurse
Yes.
who apparently she just faints whenever she feels pain. And they decided, let's use her.
Yeah.
Like, what the? Why didn't she tell people, hey, occasionally when I get shots, I black out?
Yeah.
Because everybody's like, oh my God, look what happened to that lady when she got the vaccine. I'm like,
Yes.
turns out that lady, if you gave her an Indian burn,
That's right.
she would black out. She just blacks out. She stubs her toe. She just falls down.
it makes you wonder what kind of nurse she is.
It's crazy. I used to date a girl, and her dad was a dentist, and he would faint if he saw anything fucked up. Like one of their kids got, her brother got like bad sunburn, like blisters, and the dad just fucking fainted.
That's not what you want in your medical.
It was genetic though, because she would faint if she saw someone getting a needle in a movie. We went to the movies and someone was shooting up, and she was like, and I go, "Whoa, what the fuck is going on?"
She sounds like a good time. She's not the one you were worried about getting HIV from. It sounds like.
Well, she just had a thing for fainting. I don't know what it was. I don't understand fainting. I've never fainted, but I've seen it. It's weird. Especially if it's like you see something, just seeing something, like, and you can't take it.
No,
that's evolution telling you you're not supposed to be around.
That's right.
You're not supposed to be spreading them genes. When the war happens, you're supposed to you fall down and people just stomp you to death while you're out cold. I mean, I don't fucking get it. But that lady should have told everybody. Jesus Christ.
She should have.
Because if you gave that to Jamie, if you shot him with it, he'd just sit there and go, yeah, that hurts. Yeah. And everybody would go, well, the vaccine seems okay. Look at Jamie. He's got a smile on his face. He doesn't give a fuck. Is there a problem with people who have had, like Jamie? Jamie's had COVID and beat it. Is there a problem with them getting the vaccine?
It doesn't look like it, but the question we should be asking is why would these people get the vaccine at all? Well, you have antibodies. You beat it.
But what about a year from now, 2 years from now?
Okay, so naturally generated immunity in general and again, I don't want to talk like a virologist. I'm not a virologist. My understanding of this is that naturally generated immunity, in other words, you get the actual illness and you beat it, is stronger in general than vaccine-generated immunity.
Right.
So why are we encouraging people who have naturally generated immunity to bother with the vaccine, which at best will give them the antibodies they already have, and at worst they'll have some kind of anaphylaxis. They'll have some kind of shock reaction to it.
I think that the reason being is that we can't prove that a person has had it and beat it. There's
You
not
can
like
prove
a
you have
database.
antibodies.
But what if you don't have the antibodies visually anymore? Like Jamie barely has them.
Okay, but he
and
has them.
You thought you might have had it, right? You didn't have any antibodies.
That's right. So I can't prove that I had it.
Or it didn't show in the test.
It didn't show in the test. That's right. And when I had the original test a few months ago, it didn't show. So I can't prove that I had it. And I may not have had it. So maybe I should, get a vaccine at some point, even if it's not the mRNA vaccine. Maybe I should get a vaccine. That's my choice. Okay. Mm-hmm. And it can be informed by whether or not I have antibodies. But the idea that we're encouraging people willy-nilly to get this thing, even if they have beaten it, makes no sense.
Well, I think it's, again, because it's not documented, because there's not a documented registry of people who have had the vaccine.
I think in this case,
people who have had it and beat it.
I think you're being naive. I think that the reason that it's being pushed is the same reason that you're seeing lockdowns again right now, which is it's part of the societal / public health / political pressure to get everyone vaccinated. So it's basically...
So you think the lockdowns are right now just to get people vaccinated?
No, not just to get people vaccinated. It's to give people... It's a stick, right? It's like we got to get out of this. The way we're going to get out of this is by getting everybody vaccinated. Everybody.
But why would they do that? Why would they risk these small businesses? Why would they risk suicide, drug addiction,
Have you
overdoses?
noticed our political leaders factoring any of those things into their considerations in the last 10 months? Especially the blue state ones?
But don't they get some sort of encouragement or advice from the medical community?
Well, they get it. Yes, they do.
But they're basing this on the amount of ICU beds that are available, right?
They're basing it.
That's what King Gavin, of the King of California, says.
That's right. That's right. He is, or that's what he says.
It's a nation state.
It's a nation state.
That's what he calls it.
And guess what? Every place where there's a surge goes through, except New York in the spring where it looked somewhat worse. Every place goes through the same panic, the same media and public health fed panic. We're out of ICU beds when they're not actually out of ICU beds.
So you don't think California's really out of ICU beds?
No. First of all, they can add more beds, okay?
That's a good question, right? Why didn't they do that? They had 8 months to do that.
Right, because in places where they've added beds, like even in New York, even in April, the field hospitals were empty, essentially. The hospital ships were empty, and those are incredibly expensive to run. So so despite all this theater, okay, ICUs are supposed to be almost full. They're supposed to run 80 to 90% full. They're incredibly expensive. They're like very skilled doctors and nurses and expensive machines sitting around. You think you want them to be empty all the time? You want them to be, you don't want a lot of extra ICU capacity. You want some, but you don't want a lot, okay? So they're supposed to be mostly full. And guess what? I can find you pictures, they're easy to find, of field tents being set up outside hospitals in 2018 in California for the flu. California, unlike actually Florida, California runs a little bit tighter. You can look at the number of hospital beds per person in California. It's fewer, okay? So is California tight right now? If you're a nurse in California, are you working long hours? Yeah. Does it probably suck for you? Yes, it does. Okay. Do you have my respect? Yes, you do. Okay. And if you're a doctor and if you're a janitor, these are people are working hard. They deserve our respect. That does not mean the medical system is near collapse. Okay.
So what is the incentive? So if the incentive is to get people vaccinated, and this is the reason why they're locking down, where is the directive coming from? Like, who is benefiting from this, or who is pushing this idea that the way to move forward is to vaccinate everybody, and one of the ways we're going to be able to vaccinate everybody is to force a lockdown? It seems like a grand conspiracy theory.
So it's not.
It does.
It's
I gotta
okay,
say, if you wanted to go deep, Alex Jones,
Sure.
you would say the reason why they're doing the lockdown is because they want people to take the vaccine, and this is why they're setting this up.
So if I said it that baldly, I'm pushing the limits of what I think. That's not exactly what I think. I don't believe in conspiracy. I believe in confluence. Okay.
Okay.
So
I like
so
saying that.
so you're a public health expert. Okay. You want people to get vaccinated. You think that this is the way out of this. Okay. Your only focus is on beating COVID.
Right.
Okay. It's not on stopping suicides or, that stuff it means something to you, but
it's not your job.
That's right. Your job is to beat COVID. Okay.
Okay.
You think the best way to beat COVID is to get everybody vaccinated. And yeah, there's going to be some adverse events, but you know what? Most people who get it, the vaccine will be fine. Nearly everybody. Okay. And maybe they'll have a couple days of fever and maybe that fever will be bad, but they'll be fine. Okay. COVID kills people. And you sort of ignore the fact that mainly, 90% of the people it kills are over 70 or, whatever the numbers exactly are, but it kills people. You want that to stop. Okay. The vaccine is controversial and unpleasant to a lot of people, and we've never really forced adults to take a vaccine before. Okay. If lockdowns are also unpleasant and you think they're useful, you think they're going to slow the spread, what is the disincentive for you to recommend lockdowns to Gavin Newsom or anybody else? Okay. You think they're good in and of themselves because they slow the spread, and you're aware that they are going to make people more willing to take a vaccine. That doesn't mean it's not a grand conspiracy. It's not like Bill Gates is calling, Rachel, what's her name in Los Angeles County or whoever the equivalent is in Texas. It's the incentives are lined up the same for everybody. They reach the same conclusions.
When you look at the fact that Los Angeles has had the longest lockdown and some of the most stringent lockdowns, but yet has the highest number of cases, what has been the explanation for that? Like, Cuomo had the worst reaction. He was like, you didn't want to get fat. You shouldn't have ate the cheesecake. You didn't wear your mask. Like, he had the dumbest, fucking down-home, dopey logic for why people were sick. He was literally blaming the people who were sick and blaming the imminent lockdown on people being assholes.
Right. So I mean, my response when you say that to me is it's obvious. Lockdowns do not work. The public health establishment response is we didn't lock down hard enough.
Yeah.
It's the Cuomo. We told you to stay inside. We told you to not see your family for Thanksgiving or Christmas, even though it's been the worst year of your lives. And like half of you are, semi-suicidally depressed, too bad. This is going to go on and on and on. To me, that is completely inhumane. And it ignores the fact that lockdowns don't work.
Yeah, it doesn't seem to work, but it did work in Australia. Melbourne had a bit of a resurge, but didn't Sydney do a really good job of the lockdown? Didn't some parts of Australia?
So fair point. Okay, if you lock down for a really long time, not weeks, months, okay, and you're in a place where the spread is not endemic. So Australia, it's not New Zealand, okay, it's a lot bigger than New Zealand, but it's still its own continent.
It's still less than the people in California, and it's the contiguous
and they
size
can
of the contiguous United States.
And they can control entry and exit completely.
Right.
Okay. So they locked down Melbourne in an incredibly strict way. I mean, and they were serious about it. They had drones patrolling and they were tracking license plates and they were arresting people and they were literally breaking into people's homes who were, pushing back against the lockdown. The police weren't making arrests. There's videos of this stuff. You can see. It's not a conspiracy theory. You can see it. Eventually, you are able to burn the virus out after a matter of months in that region. It looks like. It also helps if the weather helps. Remember, it's the Southern Hemisphere. They were going into the summer. Okay. The virus doesn't do as well in the summer in temperate areas. So,
it's because it dies in the light, right? It dies in sunlight.
There's also an issue with humidity. Heavy humidity is not great for the virus. It looks like.
So get in the sauna.
That's get in the sauna.
But you can't because the saunas are closed.
Catch 22.
Yeah.
But just to go back to Australia. Okay. So now what do you get? You get to live in fear that this thing that 99.7 to 99.9% of people survive is going to come back. So if there's another case or another 15 cases, you lock down again. Who wants to live this way? Who wants to pretend? Again, if it's anthrax, if it's the plague, okay, we're going to have to, totally remake society.
What do you think should be done?
I told you.
Right
now. Right
You're
now.
the king of the world.
Open the schools. Start with that.
Okay.
Open the schools. Open any places of worship that people want to go to. Restore people's lives to normality. Okay?
I have an issue with, I shouldn't say I have an issue. I have a concern with just the distribution of power. And this is not a conspiracy. This is a normal reaction to human beings when you all of a sudden give them the ability to control people's work, travel, anything. You give people the kind of power that Gavin Newsom has claimed in California and people are pushing back against.
Yep.
People don't want to give that up. They don't ever want to go, okay, we're back to normal again. I can't tell you what to do.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't seem logical to me. How are you such a powerful person if you're telling me, I have to stay home? But I guess people like it.
No, they don't like it.
I mean, no,
they don't like it anymore.
No, I mean,
people like the power.
Yeah. I don't understand. It's not
those are the kind of people that want to be a governor or a mayor in the first place.
I guess that's right.
They're fucking weirdos, and now, they feel like this power is theirs to wield.
Right.
And
I know what's best for you.
Yeah, and the court has actually stepped in and kept him from making new laws that doesn't get passed by the legislature.
We're gonna look back on this with such embarrassment and humiliation for the way we gave up our civil liberties so cavalierly.
Well, especially when you see how hypocritical these politicians are.
And
the
Burks.
mayor of Austin, Texas, got caught telling people now is not the time to relax while he was in Cabo.
Yes.
Which is like, good Lord, man. That's the place where you go to relax.
That's it.
It's the craziest fucking thing to say. Flew in a private jet with 8 other people to Cabo and then sanctimoniously told people now is not the time to relax.
Yeah. No. And what about Burks?
Yeah.
Did you see what she did last week?
What did she do?
Okay. She got caught. By the way, I'd like to be a fly on the wall at her next family reunion because I think it was her daughter's sister-in-law who narked on her. She went to Thanksgiving, essentially the day after Thanksgiving. She and a bunch of family members went to her vacation home in Delaware. Okay, she's telling people you can't see family, one household. You need to stay at home. She goes to this vacation home, and what's her excuse, Joe? This is the best. Oh, it wasn't actually a Thanksgiving gathering. I was winterizing my house, and I needed my family members there.
Oh, well, the virus doesn't spread that way.
Yeah, of course.
During winterization, the virus has been shown to be 100% ineffective. Yeah. Dr. Burke says she will retire.
Oh, this is new.
Overwhelming holiday travel scandal.
Couldn't have happened to a nicer lady.
Wow. But
my joke was she slipped and fell and landed on Thanksgiving's dick.
LOL. There was a time, though, that I felt bad for her when she was sitting next to Trump and Trump was talking about, we could just inject them with disinfectants. That would work. Perhaps get the light inside their bodies. When he was talking, and she's just sitting there going, oh, no, oh, no.
Yes.
Yeah, they're hypocrites. I mean, Gavin Newsom getting busted at that restaurant, eating indoors, saying he was outdoors.
Yes.
There's a fucking chandelier above you, bro.
Yeah.
You got pictures of it.
Yeah.
You're not wearing a mask. You're sitting right next to people. This is a guy telling people to wear a mask in between bites of food.
I know, telling you how to eat.
Which made less sense.
And sending his kids to school.
Yes. Yeah, where they sat indoors.
That's right.
Yeah. Yeah, safety precautions were put in place because he has money. It's not good. It's not good. None of it's good. But it is good that people get exposed to the fact that these people, they're not these just beautiful people that only care about you.
Did we think that?
Some people do. Some people love to believe that. Some people believe that about fucking Joe Biden because he was the alternative to Trump. They're like, he's our savior. Joe's amazing. We're going to get him in office. It's going to fix everything. Hey, the guy that wrote the 1994 crime bill that put more people of color in jail for the rest of their fucking lives for nonviolent drug offenses than anybody ever. Yeah, that guy? Oh, yeah, he's going to fix it all. Yeah. It's crazy how we look to these people like daddy. Like daddy's going to come swoop in and fix everything. Well, they're career politicians. They've been corrupted from the jump, from the moment they got into office.
Yeah, and that was Trump's value proposition, right? Like, I'm not one of those guys. Yeah, yes. I'm an asshole. I'm the king of the assholes, right. But I'm not pretending to be anything else.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what they were selling. That's exactly what his people were selling as... I think we need someone who's not an asshole and is also not one of them. I mean, and that's maybe our next hope.
Are you running, Joe?
No, fuck no, dude. Listen, all you people, just no, no, don't. I'm dumb. I'm not that person. I'm a cage fighting commentator and a stand-up comedian. I have no desire to run anything or have any power over anybody. Definitely no run for office. But I do have an interest in someone who's smart, who does not like the way things go and has that calling, is not a part of this system. The problem is this system is so entrenched in its own corruption, its own influence, and all of the lobbyists and special interests. There's so much that's like tangled in so many vines, and the people that rise to these positions of senators and congressmen and mayors, and they're so deeply infected by this fucked up system that we need someone that's outside of it, or someone who is just of superior character.
Well, let me pivot to vaccine again for a second.
please.
'Cause you got me thinking about the vaccine. We were talking about this. Here's what we've forgotten or not thinking about the vaccine. The vaccines are commercial products. Okay.
Yeah.
They're made by for-profit companies that have done exceptionally well this year. Okay. The top executive at both BioNTech, which is the German company that makes the Pfizer vaccine, and Moderna have made billions of dollars in stock gains this year. Billions. Okay? Generational wealth. Now, I covered the drug industry for the Times for a number of years. Okay? It's not that the companies want to kill people. They don't. And sometimes they do really good things, like they created HIV medicines. Okay?
And Viagra.
And Viagra.
Woo!
And statins, okay? And
Yes.
they do good
Sure, they've
things.
helped a lot of people.
Okay. When they are moving towards commercialization, when they have put significant money into a product that they believe is effective or that looks to be effective, what's the biggest problem with these products usually? It's not lack of effectiveness, although it can be. It's side effects, okay? So they, in general, will not be honest about side effects. And that is what's happening. And I saw with drugs from major companies that I covered for the Times, the leading companies in the industry, including Merck, which everyone said was the best one, okay, in the whole industry. They won't tell the truth about side effects.
Can I push back on that?
Sure.
Why do we know about all of the negative consequences of the vaccine then?
Because, okay, so the stuff is in clinical trial data. And in some cases you have to actually sue the companies and get corporate records.
Well, that's another problem.
We
because
can't sue these guys. That's right. And that's a very serious problem, because if you're Pfizer or whatever, the last check on you is, are we betting the company here if something goes wrong? In this case, if it all goes tits up with the vaccine, I'm not saying it will, it probably won't. They're going to say, hey guys, we did what the FDA told us to do. You wanted this fast, and the White House. We did what you told us. You protect. You know who has total immunization? You know who's vaccinated? The companies are vaccinated from liability. Ooh. You cannot sue them.
That is a new thing, right? That has never existed before.
It's been a fight actually about vaccines for a while. Vaccines, you get compensated by the government. There's been an issue around
There's
vaccines.
a vaccine court.
That's
right?
correct,
yeah.
which is separate from like every other court.
And
But,
I'm sorry. I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, go.
Does that exist because of the biological variabilities of people, that some people, for whatever reason, have adverse reactions?
I think it basically exists because the company said, look, you know what? If there's a 1 in a million chance that a healthy kid dies after our vaccine, or even 1 in 10 million, we're gonna pay $1 billion for that.
Right.
A trial lawyer is going to kill us for that, so you have to protect us.
The anti-vax community,
Yes.
like there's a whole community of people that attribute a series of ailments, including
Autism,
obviously that to vaccines. That is like the most maligned and marginalized of all the conspiracy groups, because the thought is that you're not just pushing flat earth theories, you're actually harming people because kids are getting measles now that weren't getting it before, and there's a consequence of like a real direct transmission of these diseases that we were protected against just a decade or so ago.
You're screwing over your own kids. And honestly, like I've never looked into sort of the anti-vaccine arguments. I've always thought of them as being generally flat earther, I would say, and conspiratorial. With this vaccine, I know it's different because the technology is new, because They want every healthy adult to take it. It feels different to me. It feels more like a pharmaceutical product, and that's something that I know about. But just to go back, okay, so you asked me, where do we know about this stuff? Well, the companies, they will. Look, there was a phenomenon for a long time. It was called the file drawer clinical trial. So you'd run a trial, and if the results were negative, you never published it, okay? Or if it showed a lot of side effects, you never published it. The FDA got the data, but the FDA has a lot to do, and if the drug was already approved, they might never do anything with it. So the companies accumulated bad data from time to time that no one ever saw, except people in the FDA who often didn't do anything about it. And it only came out during lawsuits. Okay. But the bigger problem is this. It's that yes, the companies will disclose the data, sort of the pre-approval data, but then they'll do what they can to downplay it. So if you're the CEO of Moderna or the CEO of Pfizer and you have a commercial product that you're getting paid for that's going into people's arms right now, do you want a discussion that says, hey, maybe only people over 75 should really take this right now? By the way, the market size on that is 1/20th of the adult population. And we should make sure everybody else who's taking it is well aware of these potentially, painful side effects. Or do you want the conversation around this to be, screw you, we're all getting it, and you're a real jerk if you even argue about it?
Well, so do they have any obligation to publish the potential side effects?
I mean, at this point, they don't have a legal obligation, although
right,
they might face criminal liability, I guess. But I'm not saying that they haven't published it. What I said to you is I got the data from their publishing it. What I'm saying is the conversation is we're not having an honest conversation about it, and the companies have every financial incentive to keep the conversation dishonest.
Right, keeping the conversation dishonest, though, but there's a difference between keeping the conversation dishonest and not publishing the results. But you could keep the conversation dishonest, but yet still have that information available.
That's correct. And
if they had no concern whatsoever about profit and they were just interested in transparency, and they came out and said, "Folks, this is the virus. It's killing X amount of people. This is the vaccine. The vaccine is going to affect people in different ways, and a certain number of people are going to have a severe reaction that could potentially cause them to be hospitalized." Sure. You would be okay with that then?
Yeah, that would be much more honest. Absolutely.
What is their stance? Are they just not mentioning this? It's like
it's funny.
You got to kind of dig for it, right? You got to.
Because they have so much momentum and they sort of have the entire public health community on their side, they don't actually have to say that much right now. I mean, there's been sort of positive stories written about Pfizer and Moderna. They don't have to market this as much because everyone's marketing for them. But let me give you another sort of on-point example of this. So the Pfizer vaccine, there were 40,000 people in that clinical trial. They enrolled 40,000. They gave 18 or 19,000 the drug and 18 or 19,000 placebo. We looked at the data about who dies, right? It's mainly people over 65, especially 75, 85. How many of those 18,000 people who got the vaccine do you think were over 75?
How many?
Fewer than 1,000. 800. Fewer than 5%. Okay. If they'd wanted to run a good clinical trial, a really good clinical trial, they should have gone to every nursing home in the country. Not everyone, but they should have gotten a few thousand people who were actually at high risk from this into the trial. Okay. You know why they didn't? A, it probably would have slowed things down, and this was a commercial race, as well as, they were told to go as fast as possible. B, it might have been expensive. And C, that would have shown everybody where the risk is, and then maybe the discussion would have been around immunizing those people. Commercially, you want the trial set that's big and includes people in their 20s, even if they're not at high risk. Medically, you want the trial set that includes the people who are at risk. They didn't do that. I mean, did they exclude those people? No, but they didn't try to enroll them specifically, and they didn't get that many of them.
There was a really weird thing that was published online that I was reading where they were discussing who was going to get the vaccine first. And they were advocating against getting it to older people because they were white.
Yes.
Did you see that?
Yes.
Generally tend to be white, and it was about evening things out.
Yep. It was in the New York Times. This wasn't some. This was
who advocated
a guy named Harold Schmidt, who's a bioethics professor at the University of Pennsylvania, said openly that it was not fair to give this to older people. By the way, there's a lot of older people who are black and Hispanic too, but that you should give it to essential workers first because so many of those people are black and Hispanic and older people are white.
But isn't there an argument to give it to essential workers first because it slows the curve?
So I wouldn't give it, no, because again, those people
slows the spread, rather.
Those people are,
because those are the people that are more likely to catch it, right?
If you actually look at that, there's not that much evidence that essential workers catch it at higher rates. Believe it or not. It just because, again, it's everywhere.
Right.
Everybody's out. I mean, except the Karens who never leave their homes. Everybody's out. Everybody's kind of passing it around. And here's the other thing I'd say, and this is the true nightmare scenario. It's very, very unlikely. Suppose there's something really wrong with the vaccine. Well, who have we been giving it to the last week? We've been giving it to doctors and nurses. We've totally screwed ourselves if there's a real problem.
Right.
Oh, which, again, that's unlikely. But
so this guy he's a bioethics professor.
Yes.
What is his logic behind that? Like saying
that white people have all the advantages in society and they don't deserve this one too.
He's a white guy.
He's a white guy, yes. Harold Schmidt, you get Harald. You could definitely find it.
It seems strange that you would openly advocate for singling out people based entirely on the fact that they're of a particular ethnicity or race.
I agree. Yeah.
And but to make this distinction, like, is he advising this? Is that what he was saying? Was this his personal opinion?
Well, it was his opinion as a bioethicist and, public policy expert.
But does he have any input whatsoever on how things get administered?
So I mean, does he have input? I don't think he's like on any committees. I believe the state of Minnesota, someone sent me this, and I have to be honest, I didn't check it. I should have checked it before I came on with you. Actually overtly followed this pattern in their first recommendation round.
But there have been people, including, didn't Nicholas Christakis recommend that it would be given to first responders? Jamie, didn't he say that during the podcast? I believe that was something that he said about slowing the spread because there are people that are most likely in contact with it. He didn't look at it from a racial perspective at all.
But, I mean, I think that's a bad idea because I think, again, when you look at who's really at risk, it should be people over 75 who get it first. But I agree. Like, that's a case. You can make that case. Once you introduce race into it, you've polluted everything.
Well, what has been the reaction to this guy? I've seen
that article. On that part where his quote is right here.
Oh, there it is.
It links to a study from 2012 in Princeton. This is a study.
Study reveals impact of socioeconomic factors in the racial gap and life expectancy. Right, but he's still advocating for balancing it out. Harold Schmidt, an expert in ethics and health policy at the University of Pennsylvania, said that it is reasonable to put essential workers ahead of older adults given the risks and that they are disproportionately minorities. I get the risks part, but the disproportionately minorities part is like strange.
Right,
older populations, explicitly, older populations are whiter, Dr. Schmidt said. Society is structured in a way that enables them to live longer. Instead of giving additional health benefits to those who already had more of them, we can start to level the playing field a bit. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, this is not some random guy at the
That's a crazy thing
store.
to say.
It's crazy.
Level the playing field a bit is what you're saying is allowing more vulnerable people to die so that we could change the racial structure of the people that are alive. I mean, that's literally what he's saying, right? I mean, if the more white people die, then there's more people of color than there are white people. Like he's like, making this weird distinction.
I mean, look,
but they're more likely to die too if they catch the disease.
Look, it's stupid on many levels.
What has been the reaction to this? Do you know?
There's been pushback, but not as much as you might think.
But also support, right?
I don't want to speak from what I've seen on Twitter. There's been pushback, even among woke types. Yeah,
even woke types. Yeah, well, people go too far, and then they got to bring it back a little bit. Not yet. Wait a few years.
That's right.
Well, it's just a crazy thing to say. It's crazy when people openly advocate for doing things based on race.
Yes.
It's like, okay, because society's unbalanced. Like, Jesus Christ, we're talking about life and death of old people. Someone's Nana. Sorry, Nana, you're white. We're trying to balance it out a little bit.
I think there's been some really interesting cultural moments with this. And I mean, it's interesting that the people who are most afraid seem to be, or at least who are the loudest about being afraid, are women, oftentimes in 20s, 30s, and 40s, middle class, upper middle class, the stereotypical Karen, right? Although they're not all white. There's a lot of, but a lot of white.
I feel bad for Karens that are nice.
But,
I really do.
That's right.
I think we should stop saying that.
Well,
It's silly.
it's okay.
I mean, I'm a Joe, right? So average Joe. Like, I'm cool with that. It's fine.
Yeah, no, Karen.
doesn't bother.
Karen, there's going to be nobody named Karen. But my question, Joe, is why? Like, why are these people who are at so little risk panicking the way they are? And in some cases, they're not just harming themselves; they're harming their children.
Well, I'll tell you why. First of all, they feel vulnerable physically. Second of all, they maybe have not dived into this or dove into this as deeply as you have, so they're not aware of the real risks and real consequences, and they're listening to all the fear porn that's spewed out all over CNN and all over these newspapers, and they're affected by it. And once people establish an initial reaction to a pandemic or an emergency response, that's very difficult for them to readjust. Right. I have friends that are nice people that are fucking terrified, that are women that are in their 40s. Like moms of some of my kids' friends. So can you
talk to them about it? Or
they don't want to listen to me. I'm fucking crazy. They're not listening to this pot-smoking, cage-fighting commentators telling them not to worry about shit. I'm covered in tattoos. Like, I'm not the guy. I'm a little too risky. But they have an initial response that they got from the beginning, like I got. I was scared at first. I was like, fuck, this is bad. Yep. We got to lock down. We got to stay away from people. I'm like thinking about, like, I got water treatment shit. I'm like, we got to, make sure I have plenty of bullets. In
February, I was scared too.
I had friends that have never thought about having guns. They were telling me they want to get a gun. How do I get a gun? Can I borrow one of your guns? They were saying a bunch of crazy shit. Like, and the gun ownership, skyrocketed. That, to me, shows the paranoia. Yep. When liberals start waiting in line for hours to get a fucking rifle.
Yep.
This is what we saw. Yep. So these women who are particularly vulnerable in that group, right? Because they're physically vulnerable. And maybe their husbands are pussies. And then they're there and they're stuck. And they're like, no one's going to protect me. No one's going to protect my children. I'm scared. And then they're addicted to social media. And they're on Twitter all day because they don't have a job anymore, because they lost their job and now they're economically terrified. So they're online just hanging out with Alyssa Milano and tweeting up a fucking storm. And they're all scared. So I've answered it for you. That's what I think that's what it is. They're physically vulnerable. And then on top of that, they might not have the ability to objectively go into this stuff with an open mind and look at the variables and say, like, what is actually happening versus what is the media saying, and why is the media saying it this way? Well, one of the reasons why, unfortunately, is fear sells. If it bleeds, it leads. Yep. All this clickbait shit that people are diving into, it's like very valuable. It's a commodity to get people to click on things and to get people to pay attention to your videos, get people. The best way to do it has always traditionally been, in terms of like mainstream media, scare the fuck out of people. And they scared the fuck out of people with something that's guaranteed, to kill to 20% of the people. We're all going to die. Like, there was all these numbers that were being thrown around at the beginning of the pandemic, and these people never let that initial fear go.
Yep. And if you look at surveys, a lot of people think it's far, far more dangerous than it is. They think far, far more people have died than have. I mean, it's, I guess people get locked in, and it's very hard for them to change their minds.
Well, even intelligent people. I have a friend who was saying that he thought that Donald Trump still had a possibility of dying when he was on a steroid-fueled tweet storm. He was screaming, make America great again. He was all this crazy shit. I'm like, the guy's fine. He's 74 and fat. He eats nothing but burgers and fucking Kentucky Fried Chicken, and he just kicked this shit.
It's true. No, I mean, a couple interesting things. You could see, even into June and July, I don't think you see it as much anymore, people talking about how they hadn't left their apartments, in New York. And these are people who are in shitty, small apartments. Sometimes they have kids, and they're like, day 106, I'm beating this thing. I'm like,
Oh,
the only
boy.
thing you're beating is your own fucking sanity.
And your immune system, too,
And
by
your
the way.
immune system.
Because you're not in contact with anything else. That's the ironic part about it, is the isolation is actually terrible for your immune system.
Yes.
Your immune system thrives on being in contact with other people.
That's right. And with all looking, I mean, it's like with kids and allergies, right? We've raised a whole bunch of kids. We don't challenge them to be in dirt
Right.
or anything, and
Yeah.
they have these terrible allergies. And it's also interesting, sort of culturally. So at the beginning of this, you might remember there was Chris Cuomo on CNN. How he got it. Is he going to survive? Is he going to make it?
He seemed fine.
Yeah, you remember he chipped his tooth. Okay, and there
How
was
did he chip his tooth?
because he was shivering so hard. He said, I guess for him that's a war wound. Okay, but you
Do
might
you believe that?
no, you might. I mean, who knows?
But
he chipped his veneer. Okay,
He's clearly at least been deceptive on some issues.
Oh, yeah.
One of them was coming out of the basement, right?
Yes.
This is the first time emerging. Here I am emerging. I credited that to a producer because I know how Hollywood works. I've been involved in shows where people fudge things
Yep.
and you got to go with it because you want to keep your job.
Yep.
And that was like, hey, Chris, we're going to get you. We're going to get you coming out of the basement. It's going to be a great shot.
yeah,
And then
that makes sense.
But
But
then-
then he also got into the fight with the guy outside his house when he was still symptomatic.
Yes.
So here's what's really interesting. Back in the day, back in April and May, you saw a lot of these first person narratives, and they were all kind of the same. They're like, I got sick. I was so scared. I had a fever of 102 for a night, and then I was fine.
yeah.
And so I think the media sort of realized that those were not quite landing with the way that they wanted them to land.
Well,
They-
he was on TV the
I-
whole time he was
yes,
sick.
that's how
which
sick
is
he was.
crazy. He wasn't even coughing. He was
That's-
wearing a suit.
That's right.
He was just in the basement.
What the media figured out in about May was that the only thing that they needed to pick on to scare people was the top line death count. So that's all you hear. Today, 3,000 people died. Now, 300,000 people have died. But the only way that works is if you don't tell people the truth about who's actually dying.
Yeah.
So that's what they've done, and it's been incredibly effective. And it's horrible. It's led to horrible public policy decisions.
And it's also a short-term gain for long-term disastrous results. The short-term gain of getting these ratings and getting all these people to pay attention and getting people locked into this concept of fear. And then also it's supported by a lot of these people in the community. But a lot of these people in these media communities, they're not robust folks. I hate to say that, but they're not. There's an issue with people that don't exercise, don't take care of themselves, aren't eating well, aren't taking vitamins, and don't do a deep dive into how to optimize your immune system and your health. And these are the people that are telling you about what you're doing and who you're putting at risk when you want to have a birthday party for your kid.
Right. Yes. And I mean, I would say the groupthink is deeper than that, right? It's just, and I will say, I think in New York in March, people were scared. Like
For sure.
The hospitals really, they got as full as they've gotten.
And then there was
anywhere.
the respirator thing where all these people were dying.
Yep. So yeah, we put all these people on ventilators. We killed a bunch of them. So people were scared, and I get that. But at some point, don't you have to say, like, the sky didn't fall, and we need to stop scaring people? I'll tell you that one of the things that makes me the angriest about the Times, in May, they ran story after story about what was called pediatric inflammatory syndrome. This idea that post-COVID, there were kids who were going to get inflammatory syndrome and die, and that this was going to be a real, because kids were not dying from COVID itself, or very, very rarely. And so the idea was this post-COVID syndrome was really dangerous and terrible for kids. And it turned out basically to be a lie. Okay, there have been
Well, where did it come from?
the story?
The lie.
Well, so there were a handful of case reports, okay? It turned out this is really manageable. You give kids steroids. First of all, it can happen with the flu too, right? It's like myocarditis, right? This idea, sometimes you can have an inflammation or an infection of the heart muscle with COVID. That's true of the flu too. A lot of this stuff is true with a lot of, sort of standard viruses. So there were case reports, but instead of saying, and there's something called Kawasaki syndrome, which affects kids, which is known. This predates COVID, okay? And occasionally kids can get really sick. So this fit in these paradigms. Like this was just a very rare condition that unfortunately a very few kids were going to get sick from after COVID, okay? the media went crazy with it. And that's one reason why the schools have stayed closed for so long. And basically, by July, I mean, to a lot of people, it was pretty clear it was bullshit from the beginning. But by July, even the people who had initially talked about it were essentially acknowledging it was bullshit. The Times, they never went back. They never said, hey, this doesn't look very serious. Kids are not just not at risk from COVID. They're really not at risk from this pediatric syndrome we've been trying to scare you about. They go Chicken Little over and over and over again. And when it turns out they're wrong and, the hospitals don't collapse and we don't need 100,000 ventilators and, 1 million people don't die and the death rate is not 10% and people are not dropping dead in the streets, all the stuff that you can remember hearing. It's not 10 years ago. It was 10 months ago. They just move on to the next thing. I can't stand
with no consequence.
this. With no consequence.
What about long haulers?
Yes, long haul. There's no evidence long haul's real.
Well, what about people that have had COVID? Like, here's an example. There's a guy named Cody Garbrandt. He's a former UFC bantamweight champion, stud athlete, got COVID, and it significantly affected him for a long period of time, and it kept him from fighting in a title fight. He was supposed to fight for the flyweight title just last month and wasn't able to do it, or earlier this month, rather.
So let me be clear about this, right? If you get COVID and you have a bad case and you're in the ICU or you're on a ventilator.
He wasn't.
Okay. In those cases, though, it's going to take you some time to recover, right? If you get sick with this, really sick with it, it's like anything else. It's going to take you some time, right? The question about long haul isn't those people, right? It's whether or not some 40-year-old who doesn't even know when she got it, and in some cases doesn't have either a PCR or an antibody test to show that she got it, is now complaining, I have fatigue, and I have pain, and I have brain fog, and I can't get out of bed. There's no evidence for that as a real condition. Okay, I don't know about your friend.
But
that's a different
issue. But anecdotally, if these people do have, like my friend Michael Yo, who I talked to you about, he's in his 40s. He's a healthy, robust guy.
Sure.
Months later, he was still fatigued.
Okay.
He still had a hard time. I mean, there are people that have lung scarring, correct?
Yes, that's okay. So again, he was sick with COVID at the time, right? He actually had an active infection that was pretty damaging to him for a number of weeks, right?
Right. Recovered from it, but months later was still recovering.
Okay, so those cases to me, there's more evidence that that's a real thing, and that's something that we should look at and researchers should look at. But remember, most people who get sick with COVID who are under 70 don't get particularly sick. So people like your friend are not, it's worth looking at them.
Well, but Cody Garbrandt was suffering from blood clots.
Okay.
So he'd gone to the doctor and he found out that quite a bit after the initial infection, when he was still fatigued and he was suffering from blood clots.
So you can have blood clots if you essentially are immobile. So was he in bed for, weeks or months? Right. So we don't know, right? So we're kind of speculating. What I'm talking about is this much greater population of people who never really got very sick and now say they have long COVID. And that seems to have a lot more in common with sort of fibromyalgia or restless leg syndrome or a lot of these quasi-somatic illnesses that unfortunately a lot of the population, or gluten intolerance. I'm not talking about celiac disease. Okay. Celiac disease is real. Gluten intolerance is, I fart a lot when I eat too much bread. But
it causes inflammation. If you talk to people that understand.
So there's, again, with celiac, you can find that, right? Right. So with
but that's more than inflammation with celiac
right.
disease.
You're really ill. So what I'm saying is, with long COVID, it fits into this group of illnesses that are not well defined, that sufferers are pretty organized and loud about their symptoms. And again, I'm not talking about your friends. I'm talking about what you see online. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, where there appears to be a significant, not always, but a significant somatic component.
See, the thing about the blood clots, though, I think this has been pretty established in people that have died from COVID.
Yes, that's correct.
The blood clot issue.
Yeah.
What is the blood clot issue?
So I believe you have an inflammatory response, and you can have blood clots. You can die. I mean, COVID kills, right? It kills people, and one of the ways it kills people, I believe, is through clotting and strokes.
But when you get a guy who's in his 30s, who's a stud athlete like Cody Garbrandt, and is suffering from blood clots quite a while after the infection, I don't remember the exact time period, but that's unusual for any other kind of disease, right? And I
don't know if it's unusual for any other kind of disease, and I don't want to sound like I'm minimizing this, right?
But I've never heard that attributed to the flu,
right? So again, could we go find a case report from the flu and blood clots? Probably.
Would you find multiple case reports every year where it's become a part of the narrative?
Right. I don't know. Probably not, but I don't know. I'm a little bit glib when I say long haul doesn't exist. Okay. And I shouldn't be that glib because again, if you got really sick with COVID, you're going to have consequences. Okay. Certainly if you're hospitalized. Okay.
Right.
What I'm talking about again is this much larger group of people who didn't get very sick and who are claiming long-term consequences.
So what do you think is happening with them? You think it's psychosomatic?
Yes, I think it's mostly psychosomatic. I think that it's pretty indistinguishable from depression and anxiety in a lot of people.
Okay. So, and also this coincides with the lockdown,
losing your job, your kid sucks now. You're fighting with your husband constantly. Of course, you don't want to get out of bed.
Yeah.
I mean, I hate to be that blunt about it, but like that's. It's indistinguishable from it's indistinguishable from depression. My heart is racing. Yeah, anxiety can make your heart race.
Yeah, got it. So there's no evidence that there's some sort of a reaction to this disease that is very unusual that's causing these blood clots?
Again, I don't want to talk about blood clots specifically.
But the blood clots is a big one, right?
Yes. Well, is it a big one in what sense? Is it something that I think is common? I don't think it's common.
With COVID patients?
With this, again, we're talking about post-infection, months later. If that's come up a lot, that's not something I've read about.
I thought it was one of the things that's common in autopsies with COVID patients.
Right. But those are people who've died, right? So you've died from COVID, right? You're dying for one reason or another.
But they think one of the reasons why you're dying is the blood clots. And so it's not just this respiratory ailment, but it's also causing
this thrombotic condition.
Yes.
Yeah. That seems to be, and in fact, they tried to treat it with anticoagulants and sort of anti-inflammatories that prevent clotting. And I think the response was not actually that strong for whatever reason. But this is sort of like, again, we talk about things that I don't like to talk about because it's a level of medical precision that I don't want to pretend to. And that's sort of where this is.
Do you think, though, that the people, hasn't there been evidence, though, the people that even didn't suffer from severe symptoms had some lung scarring?
Okay, so.
Is that true?
So there have been, this is sort of like the myocarditis issue. This is about the, heart function issues. There have been these small open label studies where essentially the researchers know that the people had COVID. And they've said, we see abnormalities here on scans, okay? There's a couple of things about that. They're uncontrolled again, so you're not looking. The right way to do this would be to take 100 people, 50 of whom had COVID and 50 of whom had not. The researchers don't know who's who. Scan them all and see if you can find anything different, okay? When you're looking at people you know are sick and you're looking for abnormalities, sometimes you're more predisposed to find them. That's why clinical trials are run the way they are. The second thing is when these findings are announced, the media jumps them. So you may remember in the summer, there was this issue of myocarditis. It was healthy young people are getting inflammation of the heart and infections in the heart. I do
remember that.
Yes. And we can't have football because of it because they're all going to drop dead. The Big Ten got scared. And it was based on this one German study. Okay. So first of all, the flu can cause myocarditis. It's a common reaction to respiratory viruses. Second of all, when you actually looked at this study, and again, this is something that I have to read about because I'm not qualified to judge the data myself. The data was much weaker than it appeared to be on first glance. Okay. And in fact, the researchers basically walked back their conclusions. None of that stopped the media from panicking. So that's what happens. And with long haul, it's an even bigger problem. And here's why. Okay. There's money at stake again. There's money at stake for people who want disability, and there's even more money at stake for doctors. Okay. Who want to treat these people and who want insurers to cover it. My joke about this, which is not really a joke, is wait till you see ketamine for long-haul COVID. Okay, there are going to be very expensive treatments that are offered for this that are going to have nothing to do with it.
Well, they're using ketamine for depression.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Apparently it works.
Well, it certainly works temporarily.
Yeah, I've had people encourage me to try it just recreationally. I'm like, no, Whitney Cummings. Not trying your ketamine. She loves it. She's got the mist.
Oh, jeez.
Do you think that this is just the consequence of anytime there is any sort of a public illness, there's going to be people that overreact, there's going to be people that dismiss it, and we've got to kind of figure out what's correct?
Unfortunately, no. I think two really big things have happened one in the last 10 years, one in the last 40 years. And they mean that this is more likely to happen again in the future, unfortunately. In a way, we're lucky with COVID because COVID is so non-threatening to most, sort of healthy adults that this one's been a trial run, okay? Because imagine if COVID actually did kill 1%, much less 5% of the people who got it, we'd be in lockdown forever. So here's the two things that have clearly happened. First of all, what I call the medical industrial complex is bigger than it's ever been, both worldwide and in the U.S., okay? In 1960, the U.S. spent about $27 billion on healthcare. Now, adjusted for inflation, that was about $250 billion, okay? This year, or last year, let's say pre-COVID, we spent $4 trillion, okay? 1 in $5 we spend is on healthcare. It's practically the biggest sector. Look, I'm not saying doctors aren't good people. I'm not saying nurses aren't good people. Even in the drug companies, there are good people. They care about human health. But you need inputs. Patients are inputs, okay? And this disease created a lot of inputs. There's a lot of incentive to push, okay? And that, unfortunately, is not going away. Healthcare is only becoming more powerful. And not just in the U.S., but worldwide, but especially in the U.S. But the second factor is even more important, okay? The second factor is tech. We couldn't have done this 10 years ago. We certainly couldn't have done it 20 years ago because we couldn't have shut all the offices in the country. All the nice white-collar people who are in charge had to go in. They don't have to go in anymore. If you work at Walmart, you got to go in. But if you're a lawyer, you can do it all on Zoom. Okay, you don't even have to wear pants. And if you're Jeffrey Toobin, apparently you can jerk off while you're doing it.
So that poor guy's been hit on every podcast this week. Sorry, Jeffrey.
Sorry, Jeffrey.
I jerk off too, Jeffrey.
I do too, but I try not to do it on Zoom calls.
I think he tried too.
He said he muted the video.
Yeah, you don't mute video, buddy.
Yeah, that was your mistake right there. So okay, we couldn't have done this. No joke. Now we can. We have the bandwidth for a lot of the country to work virtually. And guess what? A lot of the country, especially adults who don't remember what it's like to be 12 years old and want to be outside and seeing your friends, kind of like working virtually. Yeah. They don't have to commute.
Yeah. There are some benefits to it.
Yes, or in the short term anyway, certainly. At the same time, guess who's done the best this year? Amazon, Google, Facebook. Those companies they've made more money than they've ever made. Their stocks are higher than they've ever been. They benefit from this. They provide the technology and they benefit financially. And you think it's an accident that Amazon and Google are doing everything they can to suppress people like me? Are you kidding? I mean,
how so? How are they trying to suppress?
Well, Amazon wouldn't publish these booklets.
Now, these booklets, let me see these.
I made them. I mean, I forced them to back down, basically, with the help of Elon.
So Amazon is selling them.
Now they're selling them, yes. They tried to censor them. They've censored every booklet or every self-published work about COVID is censored by Amazon, except this.
Why?
Because I made enough of a stink.
You made enough of a stink and you have enough credentials.
Yes.
What was their rationalization? Do they tell you why?
No. They didn't tell it.
Do you really think that the reason why they're doing that is because they want people to not be aware of all the things you're saying? Or do you think that they're worried that what you're doing is you're spreading some conspiracy theories or some untruths that are going to cause real problems and cause people to make mistakes?
So
and spread the disease.
They would say the latter, and I would say I don't care. Okay, you publish Mein Kampf. You can buy Mein Kampf on Amazon.
Can
Okay,
you?
yeah, absolutely. You can look it up. You can buy it right now. They should be in the
I
business.
don't want to look it up. I
No,
don't want
but-
that shit to be on my search.
They should be in the business of allowing ideas to flourish and free debate to flourish. Now,
Yeah.
again, am I saying that there's somebody that Jeff Bezos says, "Hey, I know we made a lot of money this year. Screw this Berenson
But
guy"?
you
No.
do recognize. Hold on, Mein Kampf.
There it is.
Jesus
Yeah,
Christ!
there it is. It's Kindle Unlimited. You can get it for free and enjoy
Oh,
access
my
to 1 million
goodness.
more
Don't
titles.
click on it, Jamie. Look at all the
It's
reviews.
4.5 stars. Jesus
What
Christ.
the fuck? 1,000 ratings. Don't click on that either. Jesus. Proceeds to Jewish charities and
Well,
organizations.
that's good. Okay, that's
nice.
good.
That's nice. But you do admit that there have been a lot of videos that have been released that give deceptive information
Yeah.
and inaccurate information.
sure.
And a lot of crazy people have made videos that people sent this to me. Hey, what do you think about this?
Yeah,
Like,
5G causes
yeah,
this.
5G. A friend of mine sent me. A friend of mine is not a dumb person. He's a successful person.
Yeah.
Sent me this thing asking me if I think this is all a radiation disease.
Yep. The vaccine causes infertility and there's a microchip. And yeah, there's crazy shit out there.
Microchips.
Yeah, microchips.
That's Bill Gates. Bill Gates wants to depopulate the planet, apparently.
Yes. So look, you've heard me. The audience has heard me for a while
Yeah.
now. That's not where I'm coming from.
I understand.
My view on this, by the way, is basically it should all be allowed to be out there.
I agree, but don't you understand, though, that this is one of the reasons why long-form conversations are so valuable?
Yes.
You and I have talked right now for 2.5 hours.
Jesus.
Yeah, so this you've established your position. Most people are not going to listen to this.
I hope they do.
Well, a lot of people will. I'm guarantee you, millions will. But there's 330 million people or whatever it is in the country. Most people are not going to listen to this. And when Amazon gets a wind of the fact that you have a booklet like this, I don't think they're hiring a bunch of people.
No,
to fact
it's
check and
automated. It's
vet.
just automated
right.
for that.
So because of all these documentaries, these pandemics and all these different things that have already been suppressed, there seems to be like an inclination to the first move is to suppress.
Yes. So, okay, it's counterproductive on 3 levels. First of all, in general, the antidote to speech is more speech. So they shouldn't say. Second of all, suppressing people like me drives readers and ordinary people looking for information to crazier theories, right? If Berenson is being suppressed, then it must, you know what? Maybe the pandemic thing is true.
Right.
Okay. And the third thing is, what I said to you about the companies having a financial incentive for this to go on, unfortunately, is true. Okay. And I'm not saying that's driving their decision making. It's confluence again. Okay. Not conspiracy, confluence. If you're Amazon or YouTube, you should be bending over backwards to allow dissent because of your financial incentives. You should show people that that's not driving your decision making.
I just don't imagine that that's really driving their decision making. I think the real consequences they're worried about is the pushback from people that are angry that you've been published.
Yeah, that's probably true. That's
I would
probably their
imagine-
first choice. You're
Yeah,
right.
because you've been attacked, and you got to imagine that the same people who attacked you will probably attack the people that are willing to distribute your work even harder than they've attacked you, because they can't really do anything to you. But they can do something to Amazon. They can do something to someone who's distributing what you're producing.
Right. You've given this guy a platform. You should be boycotted. too.
Exactly.
Yeah, I guess but look, big tech, though, these forces that are making tech even more and more central in our lives and making it possible for us to live virtually more and more and making tech more important and profitable, those forces are not going away. So the medicalization of society, not going away. The tech, the techization of society, not going away. We would not have responded to this kind of shitty, dismal little virus this way 20 years ago. Okay? And the same number of people would have died.
And of course, someone would jump in and go, "It's not a shitty, dismal little virus that's killed almost 300,000 people."
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. It's killed 1.6. If you believe, let's say that all the PCR tests are right. Let's say there's no overcounting. There's clearly overcounting right now. It's killed 1.6 million people this year. 60 million people have died worldwide this year. Okay? This less than 3% died from this. And they're mostly extremely old people. That's the truth. You don't have to like it. You can say I'm a shitty person for saying it. It's the truth.
Is there less danger of a virus that kills old people? Are old people less valuable? So this is, if there's a way to protect old people, shouldn't we do that? This would be
Of course,
the
if
argument
there's a
against that.
way to protect old
But
people,
by
we should do it.
dismissing it in that regard, by saying, and I understand that you're being pragmatic,
Yeah.
and this is honest, that old people are essentially, look, we have lifespans, right? When you get to 85, 90 years old, the general consensus is you're at the end of the line.
You are at the end of the line.
Yeah.
But Joe, ask it the other way. How many, like, if you have to sacrifice a 10-year-old or an 80-year-old, if you have to make that decision, who on
Depends
earth?
on the 10-year-old. A lot of those little kids are assholes. No, of course.
Right?
Yes. I mean, if you'd be an asshole if you were an 80-year-old and you wanted a 10-year-old to die so you could live.
That's right.
Yes.
Why on earth is it not okay to say that?
Well, because there's always a person who's looking to criticize you in any way, shape, or form, period, especially if you're a line stepper like you are. If you're a dissenter, if you're a person who goes away from the orthodoxy and not just publishes one, but 3 different booklets about this. You know, and what are the titles? Unreported Truths of the COVID-19 and Lockdowns.
So part 1 is the death counts and estimates. Part 2 is a terrible title. Update and examination of lockdowns as a strategy. And part 3 is masks. And people want me to do one on the PCR testing issue, which I might, but I feel like I need to do one on vaccines because I think the vaccine.
How have
issue is
these
huge.
been reviewed, rather?
Well, they've barely been reviewed. I mean, essentially, the media has ignored them. And one of the things, by the way, was so disappointing to me when Amazon initially tried to censor me back in June. So, Elon Musk said something, people in the conservative media said something, and there were a couple, real smart sort of libertarian types like Glenn Greenwald. Liberal, but libertarian, who said,
Love that guy.
Right.
Yeah,
he said,
he sticks his neck out.
He said,
every time.
Berenson's an asshole, but you know what? We shouldn't be censoring.
Why does he think you're an asshole?
He didn't agree that we shouldn't lock down. Whatever. He didn't, he had the sort of consensus smart person position.
Well, his husband got it from wearing a mask. His husband was his husband was protesting, wearing a mask in Brazil and got it and was really sick. And his husband's very robust and a young guy. And he was saying like, hey, this is a fucked up virus.
Right.
Yeah.
So anyway, Greenwald said, don't censor this guy. But the people at the Times didn't speak out for me at all. Okay. So what's happened in the months since? Well, you can look at the reviews. I mean, first of all, these 3 things have sold, they've sold like 250,000 copies combined. And the reviews, they've gotten like 10,000 reviews on Amazon, which are basically almost 5 stars all. And they've been ignored by the media. Just like I've been now, the Times, they wrote a hit piece on me back in July. Hit pieces
about this?
No, just sort of about me and how I'd become this anti-lockdown. Hit piece is a little strong, but not, but it was negative. Vanity Fair wrote 2 real hit pieces on me in April. Since then,
And it's all about the lockdowns.
About me and like how I, don't know what I'm talking about, and every scientists hate me, blah blah blah.
2 hit pieces.
Yes, and Vanity
First
Fair.
one must have been very successful.
The first one was sort of a slap, and then they tried again with the second one. Since the Times kind of swiped at me and didn't really draw blood, the media's position has basically been to ignore me. So I go on Fox, like I'm on with Tucker, Laura, a fair amount, and
That's the move.
But no, I mean the problem is that I need to be on.
I understand. Listen, Glenn Greenwald goes on them all the time.
I mean, I like them. They're
as well.
smart. They ask good questions. But I should be on. Rachel Maddow, you know what? As I've said, have me on live. You can ask me anything. As long as it's live, so you don't get to edit, make me look like an asshole.
Well, they're worried about the blowback. They're worried about the blowback, like, we were talking about that I had from the Abigail Schreier podcast or any of the other podcasts that are controversial. They're worried about blowback.
Pretending that you
scared.
don't exist or that I don't exist is not helping these people. Your audience is huge. My audience is not as huge as, it's not even a fraction as huge as yours, but it's real.
Well, they still think of themselves as the mainstream. And it's not really the case anymore. You're one of the mainstream. When there's other people that you don't consider mainstream, and they have hundreds of millions of views.
That's right.
You say that's not mainstream. Well, what the fuck is mainstream
That's
then?
right.
Like, what do you consider? Does it have to be sanctioned by a corporation that has not just a clear mandate, but that you get direction as to what you can and can't say and who you can and can't have on. These gatekeepers of information, and the idea that these gatekeepers should be influenced and also not just influenced but directed by financial decisions, whether it's financially viable, whether or not corporate interests are being served, whether or not advertisers are going to support this particular subject matter.
But here's the thing: the Times and the Washington Post, those places have now failed as gatekeepers, and that's why they're screaming for Google and Facebook to do their job for them, because they know they can't control it anymore.
There's a little bit of that, but there's also a legitimate worry that some of these people, when you don't have any gatekeepers, right, and it's open information, there's some people that are going to say things that aren't accurate, and those things are going to become spread and retweeted, and then these conspiracies are going to become something that people actually believe in when they're not accurate. What they would like is there to be some sort of gatekeeper or some sort of but the problem is they've been so fucking shitty at it that no one trusts them anymore.
That's right.
You guys lie about so much, and you distort so much, and you have this obvious political ideology that you're relying on, and you filter everything through.
That's right.
You can't. There's not a real clear objective news source that will say we're wrong about this or we've been wrong about that. Like you were talking about with the various things that, especially with the child disease, that they never pushed back against. I mean, they never went back and corrected it. They should have an equal response to the fact that they found out that they were in error.
Yes, they should.
Yes.
And
if they want to be trusted.
Instead they try to smear me and smear you. Like I'm a QAnon. Like I'm not. Does anything I say sound QAnon to you? Like,
A little bit.
Really?
No, I'm just kidding. I don't know what QAnon sounds like exactly.
Yeah, right?
I have friends that believe in that QAnon stuff. It gets weird. I've
gets
had
weird.
people that tell me it's real. I'm like, what?
What's real?
Hold on.
Like,
what's real?
Yeah.
What are we saying here? You know, it's a weird time, man. It's a weird time for information. I think we're in this sort of transitionary period between these media giants that have failed their audience in many respects. Because, like, if you ask people, do you believe this story? It was on CNN, and you said that 10 years ago. I think most people would say yes.
Yep.
Most people. If you ask that to most intelligent people today, post this whole Trump madness, Trump derangement syndrome,
Yep.
and all the other shit that's been going on, at the Russiagate, all that stuff, I think a lot of people are like, what is it about?
yeah, right.
You know, what are they? You know, what is there an incentive for them? Are they motivated to not be honest? Is this a political thing? Have they made a decision to not be honest because they think it best serves the interest of the United States if they're not honest?
Yep.
All these considerations were never a factor before, and they are now.
Yes. I mean, so when I worked at the Times, people would accuse the Times of being biased and liberal, and I would tell them what I thought was the truth, okay, which I really think was the truth at the time. Look, there was some bias in terms of story selection. In other words,
Things they cover.
Yeah, like obviously it was easier to write stories about, police brutality than how great the police were or something like that, right? But once you got past that idea, okay, you were supposed to report the facts. You were supposed to give people who you were, let's say it was a negative story, a chance to comment and report their answers honestly, not snarkily. Give them the space that they deserved because they have a point of view too. And you weren't supposed to, lie in a meaningful way. In other words, what the story was supposed to be an accurate representation of reality. And I don't think you can say those things about the New York Times anymore.
When did it shift?
Well, it shifted with Trump, and it shifted with this sort of new generation of journalists they hired, who some of whom were not really journalists. They're sort of like new media people who were, camera, they were videographers or they were web designers. They didn't come out of the idea that we're journalists first, and our first goal is to try to reflect reality as well as any, human being can. Obviously, we all live in the cave. We don't really know what reality is, but we're going to try. There's an objective truth out there that we're going to try to get to. With Trump, it became the United States is filled with a bunch of fucking racist morons. Here, get me cursing again.
You did it.
A bunch of racist morons, and we're going to show them the way, the truth, and the light. And that has been the last 5 years, and it's been devastating to journalism.
It's the indoctrination too from the universities. This woke ideology is thought to be the way, and it's in many ways it's a new religion. It's like the religion of woke is more important than the objective dissemination of reality.
Yep. And you know, if I were in that camp, I'd really be saying to myself, why the hell is it that Donald Trump won more African American and other minority votes than, you know, Mitt Romney? I mean, the guy's a racist. So many of his supporters are racist. And yet somehow we've failed so badly. We are so over the top in our woke ideology that we've lost support among these groups. You know, we call people Latinx, and they don't
Latinx.
Yeah, like
whatever it is.
Yeah, like
they don't like that.
No.
Yeah, they don't like that.
Yeah, it's a joke what's happening.
I've seen Latino people get angry at that
Right?
distinction. It's strange to me, and I wonder what saves journalism, because I wish there was a place that I could go to that I knew there was not going to be any bias whatsoever, that I knew like these are the facts as we know them, as it stands now. And it used to be the Times.
Yes.
I used to think that Times was that place. I still think the Times is better than most.
Yes.
But the problem is with these kids coming out of these universities, they feel like they have this, there's an obligation to push some sort of social justice along with the news.
Yes.
And that that wasn't the case before. They might have had their own political leanings, but the news as it stands, what it is, was most important. But it also, you would get it from the Times in the most articulate and intelligent way. They were the best writers.
Yeah.
Like you would read it and you're like, this is...
Yeah, and some of it is still, I mean, they're still very, very good. But, you know, yeah, like we're not even going to, just go all the way back to what we were talking about at the beginning. We're not even going to ask this question of where the virus came from, because it might, you know, give comfort to Donald Trump.
Right.
You have lost your way as a journalist if that's your point of view.
Well, there was a thought that covering any of the Hillary Clinton email scandals was one of the reasons why Donald Trump got elected. And so that they had fucked up and they had failed.
And guess what? They did their best to hide the Hunter Biden
Yes.
stuff. And that was
Yes.
real. Don't tell me it wasn't real. The computer was real.
It's all real.
It's all real.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's real.
so you know, it's funny you say like a centrist, you know, some kind of organization. Elon and I actually briefly talked about this back in the spring, and you know, he has a few other things to do, and I got, you know, kind of busy with COVID, and we didn't even talk about, should it be nonprofit, should it be for profit, what would it look like? But you know, is there a place for that news organization out there? Like, and what would it cover? What would it be?
It's going to have to come from a place like that, where it starts from the beginning with that in mind, and that with that as the core tenets of, you know, objective reality.
Right.
And the obligation is to disseminate this objective reality, and that not social justice, not right-wing ideology, no biases. And that's not really what we expect from, certainly not what we expect from mainstream television news.
Right. But in the interim, something is happening. I mean, and you're actually, and again, I don't want to sound like I'm kissing your ass, but look at the size of your audience. You are the sort of the leader of it. It's almost,
That's terrifying.
But no, it's true.
But
It's a
terrifying.
citizen journalism. But you're doing it in the most like organic possible way. You have people on you think have something to say, and you ask them questions. That's what being a reporter is supposed to be. And you know, and there's other people out there who are pushing. But you know, it's a slow process.
Well, it is a slow process, but I think that there's a hunger for it. And I think, unfortunately, I'm in this weird position where I have this weird obligation that I didn't expect. I just wanted to smoke pot and talk to my friends. And now I have to interview people. I have to be some weirdo de facto journalist.
Based on that Spotify contract, I wouldn't complain too much.
No, I'm not complaining, but look, I'm not. I don't need a lot of money. I'm not that person, but I do need some protection from what I think is the overreach of tech censorship. And I've had a great time with YouTube. They really haven't done. They've really been very good. And I know they take a lot of shit, but in terms of like how bad it could have gone. And I know that there's been a lot of censorship that does exist with YouTube and some other places. I've no problems with them. With iTunes, same thing. No problems with them.
Yeah, Apple's been great for me too.
But I don't trust that it's going to stay that way.
Right.
I don't. I just see too much. I see, Brett Weinstein's organization. He had this Unity 2020 Twitter account where the idea was to take people from the left and people from the right that are reasonable, educated, intelligent people and great leaders and create a third sort of option for people. Their Twitter account got shut down.
Did it really?
Yes, it got shut down.
Huh.
Yes. There's violated terms of service or whatever the fuck it is. Like, it made no sense. Crazy. Just absolute fucking lunacy. That just discussing the option of a third party was by a public intellectual who's a scholar was thought to be so dangerous that they had to shut it down.
I can't complain about Twitter. I guess, we've all had different experiences with different platforms. Twitter's been pretty fair to me, I feel like.
They do a lot of things that I don't agree with at all. There's a lot of crazy shit that they ban people from. For, and that's one of them. That's just one of them. But I don't know who's doing that. Here's the thing. When you have an enormous group of human beings working together at Twitter, how much editorial control do individuals have? Right. Like, is this stuff going through an algorithm, or is there a person, they have this trust and safety council that's filled with social justice weirdos. Like,
how Orwellian is that?
Fucking weird. Right. I'm reading 1984 again. I just started reading it again, and it's bizarre.
Yeah, that's a book you have to read now. Another book you have to read now is Illness as Metaphor. If you're thinking about long COVID, that's Susan Sontag writing about like being ill and what it means, because COVID has definitely taken on this metaphor. I mean, my joke was long haul COVID is metaphor as illness.
Yeah.
But this, the idea of you're in the kingdom of the sick or the kingdom of the well, and
we're in the kingdom of the sick right now.
Right.
Yeah.
But for most of human history, we've wanted to be well. We've wanted to be in the kingdom of the well. And now it's like there's so many people who want to be sick, it feels like.
Well, they're just scared. And there's also the worst thing that's ever happened to you is the worst thing that's ever happened to you. And if being afraid of catching a disease that 99 point whatever people survive from is the worst thing that happened to you, it's still the worst thing that happened to you.
That's right.
You haven't gone through World War I.
That's right.
You haven't seen your grandparents starve. You haven't had these horrific, violent encounters on a daily basis. So
how do you argue someone out of fear?
Right. This thing still is the worst thing you've encountered because so many people, they inflate their adversity. They make it seem like this unbelievable barrier that they've had such great difficulty overcoming because there's social value, there's like social cred, and there's social currency in suffering and in being a victim. And so there's so many people that love to talk about it, and make this big horrific deal about it.
I hate to say it, but yeah.
I mean, this is part of the problem with human beings is that we have this understanding of what real struggle is based on our own personal experience. And I think a lot of these people that are freaking out, they've had soft lives.
Yes.
It's part of the problem. You talk to people that are tough, that have had hard lives, that have fucking struggled and come here from other countries and really I've really seen some horrific shit, really seen crime and violence on a high level. They're not nearly as scared of this stuff.
No, and nor should. I mean, I'll never forget being in Baghdad in the summer of 2004 and walking through the central morgue. And I mean, there were a lot of dead bodies in that morgue. People.
2004? You were in Baghdad?
Yeah, I was working for the Times. Yeah.
Jesus. What was that like?
It wasn't great. I don't talk about it that much. It wasn't great.
Why are you laughing?
I'm just thinking about something.
What are you thinking about?
Doesn't matter.
It must.
Doesn't matter.
Can't talk about it?
Yeah.
Okay, I understand. But obviously people are going to go, you're laughing about a morgue? But that to you is, you've seen one of the worst things that human beings experience: war.
Yeah.
You've
Yeah.
seen it, and you've seen the consequences of war.
Yes.
Yeah, not just go visit a base, but go through the morgue.
No, people die. You know?
Yeah.
And sometimes they die pretty horrifically.
Yeah, horrifically in a large scale.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in something that seems very senseless. And
Yes.
I don't know how we come out of this, Alex, and this is what I'm really worried about. I'm worried about the tone of the country has shifted in this. People are looking to attack people that haven't really necessarily done anything. People are looking to attack people with differing ideas or people that question things. People willing to attack people that don't follow the orthodoxy or follow this dogma that seems to be laid out, and they're looking for targets. You know, someone said to me, I can't believe someone was mad at me. There's a person was saying about themselves, I can't believe someone's mad at me for saying this. And I said, I don't really think they're mad at you. I think they look at you and that's a target. They go, oh, there's one. It's like whack-a-mole. There he is. Get him. You know, like they're on Twitter all day, freaking out, and they're nuts. Like the problem with social media is, first of all, it's addictive.
Yep.
It's not regular human interaction.
Yep.
It lacks all social cues. Yep. It lacks all empathy. You're not seeing the person. You're saying mean things to them. You don't feel any consequences of it whatsoever. And it's something that has replaced human interaction with people for the most part. Like it's taken over the vast majority of their human interactions.
For a lot of people, that's. I mean, it's terrible for your mind. Look,
Yeah.
I was on the plane yesterday, and I could have logged on to Wi-Fi. I was like, you know what? I'm going to read a book. I haven't read a book in so long.
Good for you.
And I did, and I read
Yeah.
I read half of this very good book, and I was like, God, I mean, look, Twitter has been very important to me this year. I've gotten a lot of followers. I've gotten my message out. And the internet has been very important to me. I've gotten a lot of data. People contact me, they email me, they show me stuff. But it's devastating for all the reasons you said. And it's devastating the way you think, these sort of bite-sized dopamine hits that you get when you're surfing around. It's not good. And even, let me give you an example of something that is sort of explicitly non-political. So earlier, I think it was Sunday, Elle magazine published this article about this woman who'd been a reporter for Bloomberg. And she'd covered a guy named Martin Shkreli, who was
Pharma Bro.
Yeah, Pharma Bro, exactly. And she basically, long story short, she fell in love with him. Okay?
Oh, Jesus.
No, she did.
What's her name?
Her name is Christine.
Jesus, Christine.
Or Christy, I should say.
Oh, Christy.
Okay. No.
Find yourself a real man.
You're going to feel bad about this when I tell you where this is going. So she falls in love. She's married. Okay.
Oh, double no.
She basically quits Bloomberg because she doesn't have sex with him. I don't even think she ever had any much physical contact with him, but she falls in love with him. She quits Bloomberg in 2018 when they find out, or when she discloses it.
But she just has a relationship with him. But is it in jail? Is he in jail?
He's in jail
time?
now. He's in jail.
So she's not even like intimate.
Well, it was before he went to jail, and then she sort of slowly fell in love with him. Okay. She's writing letters on his behalf. He goes to jail. She leaves her husband. She's waiting for him.
Imagine being the husband.
Imagine being that you were getting left for this piece of crap.
I you went with crap. Instead of, you were thinking about saying shit. I saw it. Sorry.
She leaves the husband. She's waiting for him. She's trying to get him out because of COVID. He's that's such high risk from COVID. Okay. Turns out at the end of the article, she basically hasn't talked to Shkreli almost this whole year. And the reporter asked him for a statement, okay? And his statement was something like, I wish her the best of luck on her future endeavors. Basically like what you say to an employee you've just fired.
Right.
So it turns out this is not a story of like a woman who's fallen in love with the wrong guy. It turns out it's a story of delusion, like almost psychotic delusion that they have a relationship.
Oh, wow.
It's horrible. Okay. And people are making fun of her on Twitter. Like, how could you fall for this guy? What a fool you are. Like, have some sympathy. Like, whatever happened to her, wherever she is right now, like she needs, even if she doesn't know it, and she doesn't know it because she's on Twitter and she's arguing with people, she needs to be left alone and she needs some help.
Mental help.
Yeah, like but she becomes like an object of derision in the media community. This is unfortunately what social media does to people.
It is part of the plan, you know. I mean, that's part of how it lays out when you stay online all day. And again, look for targets. You find someone like that, that's a soft target. It's a very easy target.
That's right.
You're in love with the farmer bro, and he doesn't even
know you exist. I mean, but it's not a joke.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean,
there's an update today from the Los Angeles Times here at the end of the thing. It says that when they found, or of course that pops up now, when he found out that wasn't going to be published, he cut off all communication, and previously was referred to, or by his lawyers, referred to her as his fiance.
Oh my God! So he was basically
just baiting her and using her.
Oh my God! What does she look like? Don't show a picture of her, but show it to me. Don't show it online, but show it to me. Whoa, she's pretty.
Yeah,
well, sometimes people are crazy, you know, and sometimes people have these romantic ideas about a person, particularly a person that's very vulnerable and dependent upon them, right? Like maybe her husband wasn't really that into her, and maybe she looked at this guy who was locked up. Like women fall in love with fucking serial killers.
That's right, they do.
But I think that's like a danger thing. There's like I actually talked to a psychologist about that. And he was saying that there's something about like very dangerous, murderous people. There's a certain small subset of women that are attracted to that.
Well, it's like this Chris Watts guy, right? Who gets panties sent to him all the time. You know, the guy who killed. He's the one from Colorado who killed his wife, and he killed the kids, and he put them in like the oil tank. It was a terrible case.
Oh, he gets panties sent to him.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, he's a good-looking guy, and it's crazy. Like, what do you think you're getting out of that if he gets out of jail?
I think we'd all like to assume that most people are rational. I think there's a lot of people out there with 9-volt brains, and they just can't connect all the dots, and they just see, oh, he pretty. I like his cheekbones. He make baby with me. You know, and I don't even think they talk that way. I just think there's people that are just dull-minded people.
Well, as somebody said, this year has been an IQ test for a lot of society. Unfortunately, we failed it.
Not just an IQ, but an emotional intelligence test.
Yes.
And there's a lot of people that really fail with that. I've seen so many people arguing with people that they were friends with on Twitter about fucking everything and anything. You know?
Being unafraid might be more important than being smart. Which is something that you don't realize, I think, until you're older.
Right, because if you're smart and terrified, you don't do anything.
Yep.
Yeah. You got to be willing to, make mistakes. And if we're not willing to allow people to make mistakes,
yes,
it's just like the tone of people's communication should be shunned. This nasty, shitty, sniping tone should be really shunned because it's it's one of the most detrimental things to our society and our culture in terms of like establishing community and friendships and just spreading love. It's very bad.
And yet I would push back on you on that a little bit. With somebody like Burks, when she's a hypocrite the way she is, you have to say something about it.
I prefer to mock her.
Well, yes.
Just but in a funny way. Like, LOL, lady.
I agree.
Well, I'm a little bit hypocritical as well because I've been shitting all over Gavin Newsom because I think he's so disingenuous. Yes. He's like such this obvious fraud of a human.
He has great hair, though.
Fucking great hair. He's tall. I don't like his neck, though. It drives me crazy. It's too small. I want to grab it. He's just, this what we would hate about politicians.
Yes.
This archetype of what we despise about a person who's a hypocritical politician who is using their position to gain very considerable wealth.
Is he smart? Do you have any idea? Like, do you know?
Well, I saw a debate with him and Adam Carolla, and Adam Carolla just ran over him.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, Adam's pretty smart.
He is pretty smart, but it was also the way he was attacking him. It was like, it's just like it was a uncomfortable debate because it was about some very sensitive subjects that, like about minorities and bank accounts and stuff like that. But it was just sometimes people, even though they might have a functional mind, they might be intelligent, if they're running for office or if they are holding an office, they're locked into a way of communicating where they can't stray outside the lines. So even if they're intelligent, they can't they can't concede points. They can't and they're trying to win a conversation. They're not just trying to discuss things.
Yep.
I think one of the benefits of podcasts above any other kind of discourse, generally speaking, is that you don't have to be right. You just have to talk. And if someone else is right, you should be willing to go, oh, yeah, that's true. That makes sense. You should. And if you don't, people aren't going to trust you. And politicians don't do that.
Yes.
They just fucking don't do that. And if they know they're wrong, they try to weasel their way around it or worm their way. And pundits do it too.
Yep.
And a lot of journalists do it, unfortunately, too. And what people want to know is that they can trust you with basic reality.
Yep.
And I don't think most people trust politicians with basic reality. So we're left with the people that make the most critical decisions in terms of like how our society is going to move forward, what our response is going to be to disasters like this pandemic. And we're leaving it with people that don't tell the truth because they're not allowed to. They're not allowed to be honest about things that do stray outside the lines. They have to stick inside this pre-arranged or a pre-organized pattern of thinking.
But I would say I think it's a little more than that too. I think a lot of people are afraid of science and scientists in both, even intelligent people, even politicians. And so you know this mantra, this mantra this year of trust the science. Okay, so science isn't a thing.
Right.
Okay, it's a process.
Right.
It's I have an idea. I'm going to try to figure out how to test that idea. I'm going to see what the real world says about my idea, and then I'm going to go back and iterate it again.
It's also an appeal to authority, right?
But
Trust
what it
science.
should, right? That's what it shouldn't be at all.
Right.
Okay. But people are afraid of science. And there's something else that's happened, unfortunately, and this is just a function of science and its own complexity, with something like the mRNA vaccine. Okay. How many people are there in the world who truly understand it? And how many of those people are not working for one of the companies? So to some extent, I'm not saying who can't kind of understand it. You know, you can be a smart person and read, but I'm saying like who've spent their lives actually looking at this and can tell you the real risks in a meaningful way. The number is very small. Okay. And you know, think of it the same, quantum computing. How many people understand that? Like very few. And most of them are working on it. And once you start working on something, no matter who you are and how honest you are, you have an incentive to want it. Okay. To want it to work, to want it to succeed in general. That's just human nature. So to some extent, we are dependent on these scientists, on these engineers, on these highly trained people who've spent their lives on one particular question. But what we shouldn't do, and this is where journalists have failed so completely, when you're dependent on them, the answer is not, I'm going to take what you say as gospel because I'm afraid to ask. It's, I'm going to keep asking you until you can explain this to me and to the world in a way that I can understand. Right. And I want you to help me understand the risks, okay? We didn't let Oppenheimer decide whether to drop the bomb. Truman decided. Okay? Ultimately, the public health people, they are technicians. Their job is to lay out different courses of action with pros and cons. And it is the job of the politician, the lawmaker, the person who's been elected to make the decision, to make the decision. And that was Trump's ultimate failing, okay? That he failed to say, I'm in charge here. I'm making that, whatever it is, right or wrong, it's my decision. I'm not going to be afraid of you. Because he is a germaphobe and he isn't that smart and he is afraid of scientists, okay? But journalists, whose job it is to question all authority and to make sure that people's statements line up over time. If you have one job as a journalist, it's to make sure that what people are saying, you don't let them change their facts 2 days later, okay? Or change their facts with what's published somewhere else, that you question them on that discrepancy. There are many jobs as journalists, but that's a most basic one. These people failed. They got intimidated by the word science. And it's a signal failure.
In closing, do you think that maybe it's wise to support the distribution of the vaccine because the potential downsides of the vaccine are less than the potential downsides of catching the disease and getting really sick from it? Do you think that could be argued?
That's by age. Okay, if you're 85, yeah. If you're 75, yeah. If you're 65, I don't know. Under 50, definitely not. Okay? This is what people, this has been the lie all along. And it's a double lie now. Because not only, again, I keep repeating it, not only the risks higher if you're older from COVID, but the vaccine side effects are lower. So
Right,
those people got to take it, or
But if
should
you
be encouraged to
if
take
you
it.
are under 50 and you do get the vaccine and then you are immune to the disease, you could potentially spread it less. And then the
You
people
know how
that-
else you get immune to the disease? By getting it and recovering from it.
right, but you also can transmit it when you get it.
If you're symptomatic, if you happen to be in a nursing home. I mean, yes.
I understand. I'm just
yes.
playing devil's advocate.
Yes.
I'm just looking at the pros and cons of supporting the idea of getting vaccinated.
So that is the best reason to encourage younger people to do it.
Yeah.
You know what? During that period when you might be symptomatic or pre-symptomatic, you're not going to be transmitting it. Good for you. You got the vaccine. You tolerated the side effects. You tolerated the questions. You did it for somebody else. You did it for older people. You want to sell it to people that way? No problem.
I think that is the best way to sell it to people.
That's
And
not,
I think if
that's not the way it's being sold to people. It's get the damn vaccine or you're not going to be able to go anywhere.
well, forced compliance seems to be like it's just people want to tell other people to comply because they want to comply and they want to know that everyone else is complying as well. They want to know that we're all involved in groupthink.
That's right. And it's involuntary for everybody. This is what I want to do, and I know it's uncomfortable for me, so you got to do it too.
Well, listen, man, stay off Twitter for a few days after tomorrow. I don't want you to experience too much blowback. I'm going to stay off Twitter as well.
You think it's going to be that bad?
Yeah. I think it's going to be disingenuous. I think they're going to probably distort your perceptions on this. And I don't think they're going to listen to, which is what happens most of the time. Like we're right now 3 hours and 15 minutes in or something like that. They're not going to listen 3 hours and 15 minutes.
They'll just find one line where I
for
misspoke.
sure. Yeah, well, they're going to try to find something that they can take out of context where you're saying don't get the vaccine, or whatever it is.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever it is.
It'll be, you know what? It'll be fun.
Okay. Well, thank you, Alex.
Joe,
Appreciate
thanks
you,
for
brother.
having me.
My pleasure. Goodbye, ladies and gentlemen, and non-binary folks.